I was holding the heavy brass key to an $850,000 penthouse apartment in the heart of Buckhead. It was the wedding gift I had spent 40 years working toward, a legacy for my only son, Tyrell. Then my phone buzzed on the mahogany dresser, a text from a number I did not recognize. The message was short, brutal, and terrifying. Don't go to the wedding. Run. She is not who you think she is. I stared at the screen, thinking it was a cruel joke. I hesitated, my thumb hovering over the delete button, but a cold knot formed in my stomach. I called the number back. What I heard next left me standing frozen in my own bedroom, my heart pounding against my ribs. Before I continue this story, tell me which city you are listening from in the comments below. Hit like and subscribe if you have ever had to stand between a loved one and a person who wanted to destroy them. I stood before the full-length mirror in my master bedroom, adjusting the knot of my silk tie. It was an Italian weave, subtle and dark charcoal, the kind of quality you only notice if you know what to look for. That has always been my way. I am Calvin Rhodes, 69 years old, and I have spent my life moving in silence. To the outside world, I am just a retired logistics manager who drives a 10-year-old Ford pickup truck and mows his own lawn. They see a quiet black man who keeps to himself. They do not see the real estate portfolio I started building in the late 80s. They do not see the stocks I bought when everyone else was selling. They certainly do not see the trust funds I have set up to ensure the Rhodes name survives for generations. I smoothed the lapel of my suit. It fit perfectly, tailored to hide the slight stoop in my shoulders that age was trying to force upon me. I reached into my pocket and touched the cold metal of the key again. It was heavy, substantial. This was not just a piece of metal, it was a promise kept. Lucille, I whispered to the empty room. We made it. My wife Lucille passed away 3 years ago. She was the only person who knew the full extent of what we had built. We had scrimped and saved, eating leftovers and skipping vacations so that Tyrell would never have to face the indignities we faced. I worked double shifts at the warehouse, swallowing my pride when men with half my intelligence and none of my integrity were promoted over me because of the color of my skin. I took that anger and I turned it into equity. I turned it into brick and mortar. And today I was going to hand the crown jewel to our son. But as I looked at my reflection, I did not see triumph. I saw a man haunted by a nagging, persistent doubt. It was about her, Haley. Tyrell called her his angel. She was 28, white with blonde hair that always looked like she had just stepped out of a salon, and blue eyes that widened innocently whenever she wanted something. My son was an architect, brilliant with structures but blind with people. He saw a woman who loved him for his soul. I saw a woman who scanned a room like a barcode reader, assessing the value of everything and everyone in it. I tried to shake the feeling off. I told myself I was just a bitter old man, protective of his only child. Maybe I was being unfair. Maybe she really did love him. After all, Tyrell was a good man, kind and handsome. Why wouldn't she love him? But I could not forget the dinner last month. We were at a steakhouse downtown. Haley had reached across the table to admire my watch. It was a vintage Patek Philippe, a gift from Lucille for our 30th anniversary. Haley did not say it was beautiful. She did not ask about the sentimental value. She asked if it was insured. She asked if I kept it in a safe. And for a split second, her eyes were not looking at the watch. She was looking at my wrist as if she was calculating how easy it would be to slide it off. My internal monologue was interrupted by the sharp buzz of my phone against the wood of the dresser. The sound was loud in the quiet house. I frowned. Who would be texting me 2 hours before the ceremony? I picked up the phone. The screen was bright, hurting my eyes. The number was local but not saved in my contacts. I read the words again. Don't go to the wedding. Run. She is not who you think she is. My first instinct was anger. It had to be a prank. Maybe one of Tyrell's college friends having a drunken laugh, or maybe a wrong number. I moved my finger to swipe it away to delete it and go back to pretending everything was fine. But my training in logistics stopped me. In my line of work, you never ignore a red flag. If a shipment is late, you check. If a seal is broken, you investigate. You do not hope for the best. You verify. I read the message a third time. The word run stood out. It was desperate. I thought about Haley's smile. It never quite reached her eyes. I thought about how she never talked about her family, claiming they were estranged, yet she knew exactly which designers were trending in Paris. I thought about how she insisted on handling the wedding budget, pushing Tyrell to spend thousands on things that would only last a day. I pressed the call button. The phone rang once, twice, 3 times. I was about to hang up feeling foolish when the line connected. "Hello?" The voice was a whisper, raspy and breathless, as if the person was hiding in a closet. It was a man's voice. "Who is this?" I asked, my voice low and steady. "I do not like games. You sent me a text." "Is this Calvin?" the man asked. "Is this Tyrell's father?" "Yes." "Who are you?" "You do not know me," the man said, and I could hear the tremor in his voice. "My name is Lucas. You need to listen to me, and you need to listen carefully. You are in danger. Your son is in danger." I gripped the phone tighter. "What kind of danger? If this is a threat, I will call the police." "It is not a threat from me," Lucas said quickly, panic rising in his tone. "It is her. Haley. That is not her name, Calvin. Her name is Hannah. Hannah Miller." I froze. The name meant nothing to me, but the specificity of it sent a chill down my spine. "She did this to me in Chicago 4 years ago," Lucas continued, his words tumbling out fast. "She plays the role of the perfect victim. She finds a man with a good heart and a blind spot. She marries him. She gets her name on the deeds on the accounts. And then, things happen. Accidents. Illnesses. I felt the blood drain from my face. My knees felt weak, and I had to lean against the dresser for support. "Listen, son," I said, trying to maintain control. "These are serious accusations. My son is marrying her in 2 hours. Do not let him sign that marriage license," Lucas hissed. "If he signs it, she wins. Once she is legal next of kin, you cannot stop her. She will drain him dry, and when there is nothing left, or when he starts to ask questions, he will end up like me." "Like you?" I asked. "What happened to you?" "I spent 2 years in a hospital," Lucas whispered. "They said it was food poisoning. Then they said it was a rare autoimmune reaction. It was neither. It was arsenic Calvin. Small doses over 6 months. Just enough to make me weak, to make me confused, so she could get power of attorney." The room seemed to spin. I looked at the photo of Tyrell and me on the wall, taken when he graduated from architecture school. He looked so proud, so full of life. "I need proof," I said, my voice hardening. "I cannot stop a wedding based on a phone call from a stranger." "I knew you would say that," Lucas said. "You are a careful man. Tyrell told her you were careful. That is why she hates you. She called you the obstacle." He paused, and I heard him take a shaky breath. "Go to your front door, Calvin. Right now." "I drove by 5 minutes ago. I was too scared to knock. I did not want her to see me. But I left something in your mail slot." I did not say another word. I dropped the phone into my pocket and moved. I moved faster than I had in years. My dress shoes clicked sharply on the hardwood floor as I strode down the hallway, past the living room where Lucille and I used to watch movies, past the kitchen where we cooked Sunday dinners. The house felt too big, too empty. It was a house waiting for a family that might never exist if Lucas was telling the truth. I reached the heavy oak front door. My hand trembled as I unlocked it and pulled it open. The afternoon sun blinded me for a second. I looked down. There, resting on the welcome mat, was a thick manila envelope. No stamp, no return address. Just my name, Calvin, scrawled in black marker. I picked it up. It felt light, but the contents were heavy with implication. I ripped the seal open right there on the porch. Inside was a photocopy of a document. I pulled it out into the sunlight. It was a marriage certificate, State of Illinois, dated 4 years ago, between Lucas Anthony Rossi and Hannah Marie Miller. I stared at the photo ID attached to the copy. It was a younger version with darker hair, but the eyes were unmistakable. The predatory, calculating eyes. It was Haley. I flipped the page. There was no divorce decree. There was no death certificate for Lucas. She was still married. My son was about to walk down the aisle with a woman who already had a husband. But that was not the worst part. Clipped to the back was a copy of a life insurance policy application dated just last week. Applicant Tyrell Rhodes. Beneficiary Haley Rhodes. Sum insured $2 million. The air in my lungs turned to ice. This was not just a wedding. This was a funeral in the making. I looked at my watch. 1 hour and 45 minutes. A cold, hard rage settled over me. It replaced the fear. It replaced the doubt. It was the same cold focus I used to have when I managed the logistics of million-dollar shipments across the ocean. When there is a problem, you do not panic. You assess the damage, you identify the root cause, and you eliminate it. Haley thought she was marrying a naive architect and his senile old father. She thought we were prey. I took the envelope and folded it neatly, placing it into the inside pocket of my jacket right next to the brass key. I am not a violent man. I have never raised a hand to anyone in my life. But as I closed my front door and locked it, I made a vow to Lucille. I would not let this woman destroy our son. I would not just stop the wedding. I would destroy her world. I walked to my truck. I did not take the luxury sedan. I took the old Ford. It fit the part I was about to play, the confused, helpless old man. I started the engine. The roar of the truck sounded like a beast waking up. "I am coming, Tyrell," I said to the empty cab, "and God help her when I get there." The drive to the resort was supposed to take 40 minutes. I decided to make it in 30. Every minute I wasted was a minute she had to whisper her poison into my son's ear. But I had one advantage. She didn't know I knew. She didn't know that the obstacle was coming not with a checkbook, but with a wrecking ball. As I merged onto the highway, my phone buzzed again. Another text from Lucas. "Be careful. She is not alone. She has a team." I gripped the steering wheel until my knuckles turned white. A team, of course. A grifter like that doesn't work solo. I was driving into a trap, outnumbered and outgunned. Good, I thought. I prefer the odds stacked against me. It makes the victory sweeter. I pressed the accelerator and the old truck surged forward. The hunt was on. The gravel crunched loudly under the tires of my 10-year-old Ford pickup truck as I pulled into the valet circle of the Chateau Elan resort. The vehicle looked like a bruise on a perfect apple sitting amidst the gleaming white Bentleys and rented limousines that Haley had insisted upon. The valet, a young man with a stiff uniform, looked at my truck with thinly veiled disdain. I did not care. My focus was entirely on the figure standing at the top of the marble stairs. It was Haley. She was not wearing her wedding dress yet. Instead, she wore a white silk robe that probably cost more than my first car. She was pacing. The moment she saw me stepping out of the truck, her pacing stopped. She did not smile. She did not wave. She checked her watch. Then she plastered a wide, synthetic grin onto her face and descended the stairs. "Calvin, you are finally here," she called out. Her voice was high and sweet, but it did not match the cold calculation in her eyes. I took a deep breath. This was the performance of my life. I adjusted my jacket, letting my shoulders slump just a fraction of an inch. I needed to be the harmless old man she thought I was. Traffic was terrible. I mumbled, patting my pockets as if looking for something I had misplaced. "You are 40 minutes late," Haley said as she reached me. She leaned in for a hug, but her body remained rigid. It was like hugging a mannequin. She whispered in my ear. Tyrell was starting to get anxious. He thought maybe you had cold feet about the gift. There it was. Not a hello, not a how are you, just a direct inquiry about the asset. The gift she referred to was the penthouse, the $850,000 property she believed was about to become hers. I pulled away and looked at her. Up close, I could see the tightness around her jaw. She was stressed. Good. I would never let my son down, I said slowly, making sure my voice sounded a bit frail. But Haley, I seemed to have had a moment of forgetfulness. I left my reading glasses on the kitchen counter at home. Haley stared at me. Her blue eyes narrowed. "And the paperwork?" she asked, her voice dropping an octave. I tapped the breast pocket of my suit. "I have the papers right here. But without my glasses, I cannot review the final clause about the transfer tax. You know how the government is. If we do not get the tax code right, they will freeze the asset for months. I just need to borrow a pair of readers later, or maybe we can sign it after the reception when I can see straight." It was a lie, but it was a calculated one. I knew nothing terrified a grifter more than a government freeze on assets. Haley looks at my pocket. I could see the greed warring with caution in her face. She wanted to snatch the papers right there, but she could not break character. Not yet. "Of course, Calvin," she said, but the sweetness was fracturing. "We can find you some glasses, but we really should get it signed before the ceremony, just to get it out of the way. Tyrell would be so relieved to know his future is secure." I nodded vacantly. "We will see." "Will. I just need a cup of coffee first. My heart is beating a little fast today." That was the truth. My heart was hammering against my ribs, but not from age. It was from the adrenaline of standing next to a predator. "Go see Tyrell," she said, steering me toward the main doors with a firm hand on my elbow. "He is in the groom suite. I will go find some glasses." "Do not worry about a thing, Dad." She called me Dad. The word felt like an insult coming from her mouth. I watched her walk away, pulling her phone out before she even rounded the corner. She was probably texting her team, or maybe calling her husband Lucas to tell him the plan was hitting a snag. I walked through the opulent lobby. Crystal chandeliers hung from the ceiling like frozen waterfalls. The air smelled of expensive lilies and money. It was a beautiful setting for a tragedy. I found the groom's suite at the end of a long hallway. I paused outside the door. I could hear laughter inside. My son was in there. My boy. He was about to make the biggest mistake of his life, and I was the only one who could stop it. But I could not just kick the door down. Tyrell was in love. Or he thought he was. If I attacked Haley now, he would defend her. He would hate me. I had to be careful. I had to plant a seed of doubt and hope it would grow fast enough. I pushed the door open. Tyrell was standing in front of a full-length mirror adjusting his bow tie. He looked handsome. He looked like Lucille. The same warm eyes, the same gentle smile. He turned when I entered and his face lit up. "Pops," he said, "you made it. Haley said you were stuck in traffic." I walked over and embraced him. He felt solid, real. The only real thing in this entire circus. "I am here, son," I said. "I wouldn't miss this." He pulled back and looked at me. "You look tired, Pops. Are you okay?" I walked over to the leather sofa and sat down heavily. I looked at the young men around him, his groomsmen. They were laughing, drinking scotch. "Can I have a minute with my son?" I asked. "Alone." The room went quiet. The groomsmen looked at Tyrell. He nodded and they filed out, closing the door behind them. Tyrell sat next to me. He looked concerned. "What is it, Pops?" "Is it the house?" "Because if you changed your mind," Haley said, "we can just figure it out later. We don't need Haley talks a lot about that house," I interrupted gently. Tyrell stiffened. He stood up and walked back to the mirror, avoiding my gaze. "She is just practical, Pops. She wants us to have a good start. She worries about security. She had a tough childhood, you know." I looked at his back. I remembered the file in my pocket, the marriage certificate, the insurance policies. A tough childhood was not what created Hannah Miller. Greed did that. "Tyrell," I said softly, "I need to ask you something, and I need you to answer me as my son, not as her fiancé. Do you really know her?" Tyrell turned around. His face was flushed. "What kind of question is that?" "Of course I know her. We have been together for 8 months. 8 months, I repeated. "That is not a long time, Tyrell. People can hide who they are for 8 months. He walked toward me, his hands clenched into fists. "Stop it. I knew you would do this. Haley told me. She told me you would try to get inside my head right before the wedding. She said you think she is not good enough for us because she is white, because she is poor." I stood up. "This is not about race, Tyrell. And it is certainly not about money. It is about instinct. Something feels wrong. The rush, the demand for the deed, the way she isolates you from your friends." "She does not isolate me," Tyrell snapped, his voice rising. "She protects me. You are the one who is judging her. You have never given her a chance. You are just a bitter old man who thinks no one can ever replace Mom." The words hit me like a physical blow. He was parroting her. These were not Tyrell's thoughts. These were scripts Haley had fed him. She had inoculated him against me. She had turned his love for his mother into a weapon to use against his father. I looked at him and I saw the wall he had built. If I showed him the papers now, he might tear them up. He might accuse me of forging them. He was too deep in the illusion. I realized with a sinking heart that I could not save him with words. I had to let him walk to the edge of the cliff so he could see the drop for himself. I took a deep breath and forced a smile onto my face. "It was the hardest thing I have ever done. You are right," I lied. "I am sorry, son. I am just an old man missing his wife. I want you to be happy. That is all I have ever wanted." Tyrell's shoulders relaxed. He let out a long breath. "Thanks, Pops. That means a lot. She really is wonderful once you get to know her. You will see." I will see indeed, I thought. I left the room feeling heavier than when I arrived. My plan had to change. I could not convince him. I had to expose her. Publicly. Irrevocably. I walked out of the suite and headed toward the ballroom. I needed air. But as I stepped into the pre-function area, I found my path blocked. 2 people stood there. A man and a woman, both in their 60s, dressed in expensive formal wear that looked slightly ill-fitting, as if they were not used to the fabric. "Mr. Rhodes," the man said, extending a hand. His palm was sweaty. "I am George. This is my wife, Martha. We are Haley's parents." I shook the hand. It felt limp and clammy. Haley had told Tyrell her parents were estranged. She said they were deadbeats who never cared. Yet here they were standing in the middle of the luxury resort smiling like sharks. So nice to finally meet the man behind the legend, Martha said, stepping closer. Her perfume was overpowering. Haley tells us you were in logistics, but looking at this wedding I would say you were in banking. She laughed, a shrill sound that grated on my ears. We are so proud of our little girl, George added, and so grateful to you, welcoming her into your family, and providing them with such a magnificent home. We would love to see the photos of the penthouse. Is it true it has a view of the entire skyline? They were circling me, closing in. I looked from George to Martha. Their eyes were darting around, checking who was watching, assessing my suit, looking at my watch. They were not parents. They were accomplices. They were the rest of the pack coming to ensure the kill was secured. It has a view, I said, keeping my voice neutral. But the best view is from the balcony. You can see everything coming from miles away. George laughed too loud. Well, I hope you have a guest room. We plan to visit often. Family has to stick together, right? I felt a wave of nausea. They were already planning the invasion. They would move in. They would take over. They would push Tyrell out of his own home. I looked around. The room was filling up with guests, but I felt completely alone. My son was brainwashed. My enemy was surrounding me, and the only weapon I had was a folded piece of paper in my pocket and a text message from a man who might be dead by tomorrow. Excuse me, I said, stepping back. I need to find the restroom. I walked away, feeling their eyes boring into my back. They were confident. They thought they had won. They thought I was just a senile old checkbook with legs. I turned the corner and leaned against the cold wall. My hand went to my pocket, clutching the key. They had no idea. They thought they were trapping me. But they did not know that when you trap a logistics manager, you do not just corner a man. You corner a man who knows exactly how to reroute the entire delivery. I checked my phone. No new messages from Lucas. I was on my own. I pushed off the wall and headed toward the restroom. I needed water. I needed clarity. I needed to wash the feeling of their sweaty handshakes off my skin. Little did I know that the bathroom break would give me the ammunition I needed to turn this wedding into a war zone. I was about to hear something that would make the marriage certificate look like a birthday card. I pushed the restroom door open. Silence. Perfect. But as I moved toward the sink, I heard a voice. It was coming from the ventilation grate near the ceiling connecting the men's room to the women's lounge next door. It was her voice. It was Haley. And she was not speaking to her mother. She was speaking to her lover. The heavy oak door of the men's restroom swung shut behind me, cutting off the noise of the gathering crowd outside. The sudden silence was a physical relief. The air inside was cool and smelled of lemon polish and antiseptic, a sharp contrast to the suffocating cloud of expensive perfume and desperation that hung around Haley's parents out in the lobby. I walked over to the row of marble sinks and gripped the edge of the counter until my knuckles turned the color of ash. My reflection stared back at me in the expansive mirror. I looked old. The stress of the last hour had etched new lines around my eyes and mouth. I splashed cold water on my face, letting the icy droplets run down my neck, soaking into the collar of my shirt. It was an old trick I had learned during long shifts on the loading docks in the sweltering Georgia heat. Cool the blood to cool the temper. I needed to think. I needed a strategy. My enemy was not just one woman. It was a coordinated assault. I reached for a paper towel to dry my face, my movements slow and heavy. I was just about to push the door open and return to the battlefield when I heard it. It was a voice. The resort was a historic building, beautiful on the outside but filled with the quirks of old architecture. The ventilation system was a network of metal ducts that carried sound as efficiently as it carried air. The vent above the sink I was standing at connected directly to the women's lounge on the other side of the wall. The voice was muffled but unmistakable. It was Haley. But it was not the Haley who spoke to my son. That Haley had a voice like honey sweet and viscous. This voice was different. It was sharp, jagged, and dripping with venom. I froze, the paper towel crumpled in my hand. I held my breath, afraid that even the sound of my own respiration would give me away. She was not talking to her mother. She was on the phone. "Listen to me, you idiot," she hissed. Her voice echoed slightly in the tiled room next door, traveling through the metal grate and straight into my ears. "I told you the transfer happens today. Stop panicking. The old man is a stumbling block, not a wall." I moved closer to the vent, my heart hammering against my ribs like a trapped bird. Who was she talking to, Lucas? Or another accomplice I did not know about? She continued, her tone dropping lower but becoming more intense. Tyrell is completely under my spell. He is so desperate to be a man, to be the provider, that he will sign anything I put in front of him. I have him eating out of my hand. He thinks he is rescuing me from a tragic past. It is pathetic, really. I felt a wave of nausea roll through me. Hearing my son described as pathetic by the woman he adored was a knife in the gut. But I forced myself to stand still. I needed more. I needed specifics. And then she gave them to me. As soon as that deed is signed, the property is as good as sold, she said. I already have a buyer lined up in Savannah. Cash offer. We take the money, we clear the accounts, and we vanish. By the time Tyrell realizes what happened, we will be in Mexico. And the father, the person on the other end, must have asked. Haley laughed. It was a dry, cruel sound. Calvin, please. He is halfway to the grave already. If he causes too much trouble, I have already looked into a state facility. The one on the south side with the overcrowding issues. I will dump him there and let him rot. He can spend his last days wondering how he let a white girl from the trailer park outsmart him. My vision blurred. The rage that surged through me was so hot it felt like it was burning my skin from the inside out. She was not just planning to steal our money, she was planning to erase my existence. She wanted to throw me away like garbage. My hand shook violently as I reached into my pocket and pulled out my phone. I fumbled with the screen, my thick fingers slipping on the glass. I needed to record this. This was the confession. This was the end of her. I opened the voice recorder app and held the phone up toward the vent. The red timeline started moving, capturing every word. Yeah, I know he has insurance, she was saying. $2 million. If the old man does not die of a heart attack soon, maybe we help him along. Tyrell will be too broken to investigate. He is weak. That is why I picked him. I pressed the stop button. I had heard enough. I had enough to send her to prison for conspiracy, for fraud, for a dozen other things. I saved the file, naming it simply The Truth. I put the phone back in my breast pocket, patting it to make sure it was secure. The trembling in my hands stopped. It was replaced by a cold, deadly calm. I was no longer a confused old man. I was a father protecting his cub. I did not wait for her to leave. I walked out of the men's restroom and stood in the small carpeted vestibule that separated the two facilities. There was a large floral arrangement in the center, a vase of white lilies that smelled like a funeral. I waited. A moment later, the door to the women's lounge opened. Haley stepped out. She was looking down at her phone, her thumb flying across the screen. She looked perfect. Her makeup was flawless. Her hair was a golden halo around her face. She looked like an angel. She looked up and saw me. For a heartbeat, she stopped. Her eyes flicked to the men's room door, then to the wall that separated us, and then back to my face. She was smart. She realized instantly that the walls were thin. She saw the look on my face, the lack of warmth, the hardness in my jaw. But she did not scream. She did not run. She did not even flinch. Instead, she smiled. It was not the sweet smile she used on Tyrell. It was a smirk, a challenge. She dropped the phone into her purse and snapped it shut with a loud click. "You look pale, Calvin," she said. Her voice was smooth, devoid of the jagged edge I had just heard. "Are you feeling unwell? Maybe you should go lie down before the ceremony." I took a step toward her. I towered over her, but she held her ground. "I heard you," I said. My voice was a low rumble, deep and resonant. "I heard everything, Hannah." She tilted her head to the side like a curious bird. "Hannah. I do not know anyone by that name. You really are getting confused, aren't you?" "Drop the act," I snapped. "I heard you talking about the house, about selling it, about putting me in a home, about Tyrell being weak. I have it all on my phone." I tapped my chest pocket. Haley laughed softly. She stepped closer to me, invading my personal space. She smelled of mint and rot. "So what?" she whispered. "Go ahead. Play it for him. Run into that room right now and play your little recording. Do you know what he will hear? He will hear a distorted voice that sounds vaguely like mine. And then he will hear his father, a man who has hated me from day one, trying to frame me." She poked a finger into my chest, hard. "Tyrell loves me, Calvin. He trusts me. You are just a jealous old man who cannot stand to share him. If you try to stop this wedding, you will lose him forever. He will never forgive you for ruining the happiest day of his life." I grabbed her wrist and pushed it away. "He will forgive me when he sees the truth." "Will he?" she challenged. "What if I told you there is something else? Something that binds us together more than a piece of paper?" She took my hand and placed it forcefully on her flat stomach. The fabric of her robe was cool under my palm. "I am pregnant, Calvin." The world stopped. The sounds of the lobby faded away. I stared at her paralyzed. "It is a boy," she said, her blue eyes gleaming with triumph. "I am carrying your grandson, Tyrell's son, the heir to your precious Rhodes Empire." She leaned in close, her lips brushing my ear. "So go ahead. Destroy me. Send me to jail, but know this. If you take me down, you take your grandson down with me. Tyrell will watch you drag the mother of his child away in handcuffs. Do you think he will ever let you see this baby? Do you think he will ever let you hold him?" She pulled back, looking at my stricken face with satisfaction. "You have a choice, old man. You can be right or you can be a grandfather. You can have your justice or you can have your family, but you cannot have both." She smoothed the front of her robe, checking her reflection in the glass of a framed picture on the wall. "I suggest you go splash some more water on your face. You look terrible. And fix your tie. The ceremony starts in 20 minutes. Do not be late." She turned on her heel and walked away, her hips swaying, her head held high. She walked back toward the ballroom, back toward my son, back toward the altar where she planned to sacrifice our lives. I stood alone in the hallway. My hand was still burning where it had touched her stomach. A child. A grandson. It was the one thing I wanted more than anything in the world. The one thing Lucille had prayed for before she died. Was she lying, or was this the ultimate checkmate? I reached into my pocket and touched the phone. The recording was there. The truth was there. But now the truth had a cost I was not sure I could pay. I looked at the door she had walked through. I looked at the exit that led to the parking lot. I could run. I could leave. I could let them marry and hope for the best. No. I remembered Lucas. I remembered the arsenic. I remembered the words she had just spoken. If the old man does not die soon, maybe we help him along. She would kill me, and then she would destroy Tyrell. And that baby, if it even existed, would be raised by a monster. I straightened my tie. I buttoned my jacket. She thought she had trapped me. She thought the baby was a shield, but she had forgotten who I was. I was a man who moved mountains for a living. I was a man who solved impossible problems. I would not let her win. I would save my son. I would save my family. And if I had to burn the whole world down to do it, then I would strike the match myself. I walked toward the ballroom. The time for hiding was over. The time for war had begun. I walked away from the restroom hallway with the weight of the world pressing down on my shoulders. My hand was still in my pocket, gripping the phone that held the recording of Haley's confession. Every instinct in my body screamed at me to march straight into that ballroom and play the audio over the loudspeakers. I wanted to tear down the decorations. I wanted to flip the tables. I wanted to grab the microphone and scream the truth until the crystal chandeliers shook. The rage was a physical thing, hot and suffocating, making my collar feel like a noose. I reached the double doors of the ballroom and pushed them open just a crack. Through the gap, I saw him. Tyrell. He was standing near the altar, laughing at something his best man had said. His head was thrown back, and his smile was so wide, so genuine, that it stopped me cold. He looked radiant. He looked like a man who believed he had won the lottery of life. In his mind, he was minutes away from marrying the woman of his dreams and starting a family. He was happy. Blindly, stupidly, dangerously happy. If I walked in there now and played that recording, what would happen? Tyrell would not thank me. He would not hug me and say I saved him. He would see a bitter old man trying to destroy his joy. Haley would spin it. She would cry. She would claim the recording was edited or taken out of context. She would play the victim card she had perfected over a lifetime. And then she would drop the nuclear bomb she had just threatened me with. The baby. I imagined the scene. Tyrell standing between us, forced to choose between his father and the pregnant mother of his unborn child. Even with the evidence, his heart would choose her. He would hate me for ruining this day. He would cut me off, and I would lose him forever. Worse, I would leave him alone in the clutches of a woman who planned to kill him for insurance money. I let the door close silently. I could not save him by being a hero. Not yet. To save Tyrell, I had to let him fall. I had to let him walk into the trap, so that when the steel jaws slammed shut, he would feel the pain himself. I had to be cruel to be kind. I turned around and walked out of the resort. I moved past the valet stand, ignoring the confused look of the attendant who offered to get my keys. I walked straight to the far end of the parking lot where my old Ford truck was parked under the shade of an oak tree. I needed a war room. I needed a place where the air did not smell of expensive lilies and deceit. I climbed into the cab and slammed the door. The familiar smell of old leather and stale coffee grounded me. This was my domain. This was where I had planned logistics for 40 years. This was where I solved problems. I pulled out my phone and dialed Fletcher. He answered on the first ring. "Calvin." "Where are you?" Fletcher asked, his voice tense. "The ceremony starts in 15 minutes. "I am in the truck," I said. My voice was steady now, the trembling gone. "I need you to listen to me carefully, Fletcher. The plan has changed. We are not stopping the wedding." There was a silence on the other end. "Have you lost your mind, Calvin? You have the marriage certificate. You have the proof she is a fraud. If you let them say I do, then she is legally his wife. She will have rights to his estate. She will be his next of kin." "Let her," I said. "Calvin, this is dangerous," Fletcher warned. "Once they sign that paper, unwinding it becomes a nightmare." "No, Fletcher," I cut him off. "If we stop it now, it is just a family dispute. It is just a lie. But if she signs that marriage license while she is still legally married to Lucas, that is not just a lie. That is a felony. That is bigamy." I looked out the windshield at the white tent where the ceremony would take place. "I want her in handcuffs, Fletcher. I do not just want to save Tyrell's money. I want to save his life. If she walks away today, she will just come back, or she will find another victim. I need to put her away. Bigamy carries a prison sentence in Georgia. Fraud carries a prison sentence. Attempted insurance fraud carries a prison sentence. I want them all." Fletcher was quiet for a long moment. Then I heard the rustle of papers. "You are playing a high-stakes game, old friend. You are using your son as bait. He is the only bait she will take," I said, feeling a lump in my throat. "Is Lucas with you?" "He is right here," Fletcher said. "Put him on." A moment later, Lucas's shaky voice came on the line. "Calvin." "Is everything okay, Lucas?" I said. "I need you to be brave. I need you to wait. Do not come into the resort yet. Park down the road. Wait for my signal." "But the wedding," Lucas stammered. "If they get married—" "Let them," I said sharply. "Let her think she has won. Let her stand at the altar. Let her say the vows. Let her sign the paper. I want her to feel the victory. I want her to feel safe. And then, when she is at her highest point, we will bring her down." I paused, gripping the steering wheel. I recorded her, Lucas. In the bathroom. She admitted everything. She admitted she wants to kill Tyrell for the insurance money. She admitted she poisoned you. I heard Lucas gasp. "You got her." "You actually got her." "I have it." I confirmed. "But we need the police. Fletcher, call the precinct. Tell them we have a confession to conspiracy to commit murder. Tell them we have a bigamy case in progress. Get them here, but tell them to use silent sirens. I do not want to spook her until the trap is shut." "I will make the call," Fletcher said, taking the phone back. "Calvin, you have about 12 minutes before the music starts. You need to get back in there. If you are missing, she will get suspicious." "I know," I said. "I am going back in. I am going to give the performance of a lifetime." I hung up the phone and sat there for a moment. I looked at my reflection in the rearview mirror. I did not look like a logistics manager anymore. I looked like a father who was about to break his own heart to save his son's soul. I took a deep breath, opened the truck door, and stepped back out into the heat. The walk back to the resort felt like walking to the gallows. But I forced my posture to slump. I forced my steps to be slow and hesitant. I put the mask of the defeated old man back on. When I entered the lobby, Haley was there. She was doing a final check of the flower arrangements, barking orders at a terrified florist. She looked up when she saw me. Her eyes narrowed, scanning my face for any sign of rebellion. I walked straight up to her. I did not glare. I did not frown. I looked down at my shoes, wringing my hands together like a nervous child. "Haley," I said, my voice cracking just enough. She crossed her arms over her chest, the white silk robe rustling. "Well, did you make your decision? Calvin, are we going to have a wedding or a war?" I looked up at her, making sure my eyes looked watery and defeated. "You are right," I said softly. "I cannot lose Tyrell. He is all I have." A slow, cruel smile spread across her face. It was the smile of a predator who had just watched the prey roll over and expose its throat. "I knew you were a smart man, Calvin," she said, stepping closer. "I am not smart," I mumbled. "I am just old. And I am tired. I do not want to fight anymore." I reached into my pocket and pulled out the key, the brass key to the penthouse. I held it out to her, my hand trembling. "Here," I said, "you win. I will sign the papers right after the ceremony. I just want to see my son get married. Please do not take him away from me. Please let me see my grandchild." Haley looked at the key. Her eyes glittered with greed. She reached out and snatched it from my palm. The metal felt cold leaving my hand, but her touch was colder. She closed her fist around it, savoring the weight of the victory. "That is a good decision," she purred. "Don't worry, Calvin. You can see the baby, as long as you behave, as long as you remember who is in charge now." I nodded, keeping my head lowered. "I understand." She patted my cheek. It was a patronizing, humiliating gesture. "Go take your seat," she said, dismissing me like a servant. "Front row. Try to look happy. We do not want to ruin the photos." She turned around and walked toward the bridal suite, clutching the key to her chest. She thought she held the future in her hand. She did not know she was holding nothing but a piece of brass. The real power was not in the key. It was in the trust fund documents she had never seen. It was in the police cars that were currently silently speeding down the highway. And it was in the recording sitting in my pocket. I watched her go, watched her. My sadness evaporated. My fear vanished. All that was left was cold, hard determination. "You enjoy that key, Hannah," I whispered to myself. "It is the only thing you are going to get." I straightened my back just a little. The game was on. She had taken the bait. Now all I had to do was wait for the trap to snap shut. I walked into the ballroom and took my seat in the front row. The chair was gold, decorated with white ribbons. It looked like a throne, but it felt like an electric chair. I sat down and folded my hands in my lap. Guests were filing in, whispering about how beautiful the venue was. The music started playing, a soft string quartet version of a love song. It was perfect. It was beautiful. It was a lie. I looked at the altar. Tyrell was standing there waiting. He looked at me and smiled, giving me a small thumbs up. He thought everything was resolved. He thought his father and his bride had made peace. I smiled back. It was a weak, sad smile. "Forgive me, son," I thought. "This is going to hurt. But one day you will thank me." I closed my eyes and listened to the music counting down the seconds. The water was calm, but the shark was in the water. And for the first time in my life, I was not trying to warn the swimmer. I was waiting for the shark to bite just so I could harpoon it through the heart. The doors at the back of the room opened. The crowd stood up. The wedding march began. "Here comes the bride. Here comes the prisoner." The ballroom smelled like a funeral parlor disguised as a flower shop. Thousands of white orchids hung from the ceiling, suspended by invisible fishing lines, creating a suffocating canopy that probably cost more than my first house. I sat in the front row, my hands folded tightly in my lap, watching the circus unfold. This was not a wedding. It was a production. It was a meticulously directed stage play starring Haley as the innocent princess and my son Tyrell as the useful idiot. Every detail screamed excess. The chair I sat on was covered in imported silk. The string quartet in the corner was playing a pop song slowed down to sound classical, a hollow imitation of something real. I looked at the bill for this event last week. $80,000. Tyrell had drained his savings and maxed out 3 credit cards to pay for it because Haley said she deserved a fairy tale. I looked at my son standing at the altar. He was sweating. He looked handsome in his tuxedo, but he also looked terrified. He kept glancing toward the back of the room, waiting for her. He was so desperate to be loved, so desperate to believe that this beautiful creature chose him. He did not see the shark fin cutting through the water. He only saw the shine of the surface. I wanted to run up there and shake him. I wanted to drag him out the side door and drive until we hit the state line, but I remained frozen. I was a statue of a father witnessing the ritual sacrifice of his own child. Then the music swelled. The heavy double doors swung open. The guests gasped. It was a collective sound of admiration that fed the ego of the woman standing in the archway. Haley. She wore a dress that was less of a garment and more of a weapon. It was tight, revealing, and covered in crystals that caught the light like broken glass. She walked down the aisle, but she was not looking at Tyrell. Her eyes were scanning the crowd. She was checking to see who was watching. She was calculating the envy in the room. She was soaking up the attention like a sponge. As she passed my row, she slowed down for just a fraction of a second. She turned her head and looked me dead in the eye. It was a look of pure distilled triumph. She thought she had beaten me. She thought the brass key in her pocket was her trophy. She smiled, a small, cruel curving of her lips that no one else saw. It was a silent message. I won, old man. Now sit there and watch me take everything. I did not blink. I did not look away. I let her see the emptiness in my eyes. I let her think I was broken. She reached the altar and took Tyrell's hands. He looked at her with such adoration it made my stomach turn. He whispered something to her, probably telling her she looked beautiful. She nodded, but her eyes were already moving past him, checking the photographer's angle, making sure the lighting was perfect for the pictures she would post to social media later. The priest began to speak. He talked about love. He talked about trust. He talked about two souls becoming one. Every word felt like a physical blow. I remembered my own wedding to Lucille. We stood in a small church with 20 people. She wore a simple dress she made herself. We did not have money for orchids or string quartets, but when we held hands, I felt a current of electricity that anchored me to the earth. We had nothing, but we had everything. Tyrell and Haley had everything, but they had nothing. Then came the vows. This was the torture. This was the moment that tested my resolve more than any other. Tyrell went first. His voice cracked with emotion. Haley, you are the light of my life. You saw me when no one else did. I promised to protect you, to provide for you, and to love you until my last breath. I flinched. Provide for her. That was the key word. He was promising to be her bank account. Then it was Haley's turn. She produced a piece of paper from her bouquet. She had written her vows down, likely copying them from a movie. Tyrell, she said, her voice trembling with practiced emotion. I promise to stand by your side through the storms. I promise to be your partner, your lover, and your best friend, in sickness and in health, for richer or for poorer, until death do us part. I gripped the arms of my chair so hard the wood creaked, in sickness and in health. I could hear the recording in my pocket playing in my mind. If the old man does not die of a heart attack soon, maybe we help him along. She was talking about murder while standing in front of God, until death do us part. She was counting on that death happening sooner rather than later. She was not making a vow. She was stating a business plan. The hypocrisy was suffocating. The air in the room felt thin. I watched the guests wiping tears from their eyes. They bought it. They all bought it. They saw a romance. I saw a crime scene. I looked at Haley's parents in the second row. They were not crying. They were doing mental math. They were calculating how long it would take to liquidate Tyrell's assets once the marriage certificate was filed. The priest cleared his throat. The room went silent. The moment had arrived, the final exit ramp before the crash. If there is anyone here present, the priest intoned his voice, echoing off the high ceiling. Who knows just cause why this couple should not be joined in holy matrimony? Speak now or forever hold your peace. The silence that followed was heavy, thick, and oppressive. It hung over the room like a storm cloud. This was it. This was the moment every instinct in my body screamed for me to stand up. All I had to do was rise. All I had to do was pull out my phone. All I had to do was say the word, stop. I felt the muscles in my legs tensing. I felt the urge to roar. I could end this charade right now. I could save Tyrell from the humiliation of the police cars that were waiting down the road. I could spare him the pain of seeing his wife in handcuffs. Tyrell turned his head. He looked at me. His eyes were wide, fearful. He knew I disapproved. He knew I saw through her. He was terrified that I was going to ruin his moment. He looked at me like a little boy who had broken a vase and was waiting for the punishment. Please, Dad, his eyes begged. Please, just let me be happy. Please, do not embarrass me. Time seemed to stretch. The silence dragged on for seconds that felt like hours. I could feel Haley's gaze on me too. She was challenging me. She was daring me. She had her hand on her stomach, reminding me of the threat she made. The baby. The grandson. If I stood up now, I saved his dignity but lost his trust. If I stayed seated, I sacrificed his dignity to save his life. I looked at my son. I loved him enough to let him hate me. I loved him enough to let him hurt. I slowly uncurled my fingers from the armrest. I took a deep breath, forcing the rage down into the pit of my stomach. I looked straight at Tyrell, and then I nodded. It was a small movement, barely visible to anyone else. I forced the corners of my mouth up into a tight, strained smile. Tyrell let out a breath he had been holding. His shoulders dropped. He smiled back, a look of pure relief washing over his face. He thought I had accepted her. He thought I had given my blessing. The priest waited another beat, looking around the room. When no one spoke, he nodded. Haley turned back to the priest, her shoulders relaxing. She had won. The obstacle had been cleared. The old man had folded. I felt a cold sweat running down my back. I had just given permission for the trap to spring. I had just allowed my son to walk into the fire. The rings, the priest said. The best man handed over the bands. Tyrell took Haley's hand. Her fingers were slender, manicured, reaching out eagerly. He slid the diamond band onto her finger. It was a 3-carat stone, another expense he could not afford. To me, it looked like a handcuff. Haley took Tyrell's ring. She slid it onto his finger. She did it quickly, efficiently. It was not a gesture of love. It was the closing of a latch. By the power vested in me by the state of Georgia, the priest announced. I closed my eyes. Here it comes, the point of no return. I now pronounce you husband and wife. The words hung in the air. The trap snapped shut. It was done. Haley Miller was now legally Haley Rhodes. She had committed bigamy in front of 200 witnesses. She had signed her own arrest warrant. The crime was consummated. You may kiss the bride. Tyrell leaned in and kissed her. The crowd erupted in applause. People cheered. The string quartet began to play a joyous melody. Haley threw her head back, laughing, playing the part of the ecstatic bride perfectly. But I did not clap. I did not cheer. I felt a strange sensation wash over me. It was not anger anymore. It was not fear. It was a cold, metallic satisfaction. She had done it. She had walked right into the cage I had built. She thought the ring on her finger was a symbol of her victory. She did not know it was the finest piece of evidence in the case against her. I watched them walk down the aisle together, arm in arm. They passed me again. This time Haley did not look at me. She did not need to. She thought I was irrelevant now. She thought I was just an old piece of furniture she would discard next week. I reached into my pocket and touched the phone. I touched the folded marriage certificate from Illinois. Enjoy your walk, Hannah, I whispered under the applause. It is the last time you will be walking anywhere without shackles. I stood up slowly, joining the standing ovation. But while they were clapping for a beginning, I was clapping for an end. The wedding was over. The funeral for her freedom was about to begin. I checked my watch. The reception would start in 30 minutes. The police would be here in 45. I adjusted my tie. I looked at the back of her white dress disappearing through the doors. I am coming for you, I thought. And I am bringing hell with me. The reception was a masterclass in excess. Waiters in white gloves circulated with trays of caviar and truffles that most of the guests did not know how to eat. The champagne flowed like water from a broken main. I sat at the head table, a glass of sparkling water untouched in front of me, watching the vultures circle. I had barely taken a sip when George and Martha Haley's so-called parents pulled their chairs closer to mine. They moved with the synchronized precision of a team that had run this play a dozen times before. George poured himself a large glass of expensive scotch, the bottle of which he had seemingly commandeered from the bar. Martha leaned in her eyes, scanning my face with a clinical intensity that made my skin crawl. You look tired, Calvin, Martha said, her voice dripping with fake concern. At your age, all this excitement must be a strain on the heart. Do you have a history of cardiac issues in the Rhodes family? I looked at her. She was not asking out of kindness. She was underwriting a policy. She was calculating the payout timeline. My heart is fine, I said, keeping my voice flat. My doctor says I have the constitution of an ox. George laughed, a booming sound that caused several guests to look over. That is good to hear. Very good. But you know accidents happen. Life is unpredictable. It makes you think about legacy, doesn't it? He took a long swig of scotch and leaned closer, his breath smelling of alcohol and greed. Haley mentioned you have a diversified portfolio. George continued, dropping his voice to a conspiratorial whisper. Real estate, stocks, bonds. It is smart. Very smart. But managing all that must be a headache for a single man. You know I used to be in wealth management before I retired. If you ever need a second pair of eyes or perhaps a co-signer to simplify things for Tyrell's sake, I would be happy to help. I gripped the linen napkin in my lap. They were not even waiting for the body to get cold. They were trying to get their names on the accounts before the wedding cake was even cut. I have it handled, I said. I have a very good lawyer. Lawyers are leeches, Martha spat out her mask, slipping for a second. Family should handle family business. That is what we believe. Now that we are all one big family, we should pool our resources, simplify the estate, ensure that if anything happens to you, Haley and Tyrell get access immediately without probate court taking a cut. I stared at them. They were relentless. They were pushing for power of attorney. They wanted the keys to the kingdom, and they wanted them tonight. I will think about it, I lied. George clapped me on the back hard. You do that, Calvin. You do that. We just want what is best for the kids. I watched them slide away to the bar, probably to toast to their imminent fortune. They thought I was a senile mark. They did not know I was memorizing their faces for the police report. I checked my watch. 10 minutes until the police arrived. I just needed to hold on. Then I felt a hand on my shoulder. It was Tyrell. I turned to look at my son. He did not look like a man celebrating the happiest day of his life. He looked sick. His skin was clammy, and there was a frantic desperation in his eyes that broke my heart. "Dad, can I talk to you?" he whispered. In private, I nodded and stood up. We walked away from the noise of the party, finding a quiet corner near the kitchen entrance. Tyrell kept looking over his shoulder, checking to see if Haley was watching. "What is it, son?" I asked. Tyrell took a deep breath, his hands shaking. "Dad, I am in trouble." "What kind of trouble?" "It is the caterer," Tyrell said, his voice cracking, "and the venue manager. They just came to me. The final payment was due an hour ago. My card was declined." I frowned. "Declined. But you have a high limit, Tyrell. You have savings. It is all gone." "Dad." Tyrell admitted, tears welling up in his eyes. "The wedding cost 3 times what we budgeted." Haley kept adding things. The flowers, the imported wine, the lighting. She said her parents were going to cover half, but George said he forgot his checkbook at the hotel and his bank flagged his card for fraud because he is traveling. I closed my eyes. The oldest trick in the book. The check is in the mail. I forgot my wallet. "So you are paying for everything I asked?" Tyrell nodded miserably. "I maxed out everything, Dad. The venue manager says if I do not pay the balance of $50,000 right now, they're going to stop the service and call the police. It would be humiliating. Haley would be devastated." He grabbed my arm. "Dad, please. I know you have it. Can you loan me $50,000? Just for tonight, I will pay you back. I promise. Once we get the house, we can refinance or something. I just cannot let this night be ruined." I looked at my son. He was begging me to pay for his own destruction. He was drowning, and Haley was the one holding his head under water. She had drained him dry. She had taken his dignity, his savings, and his credit score, and now she was using him to come for my money. $50,000, I repeated slowly. "Please, Dad." Tyrell begged, "Do it for me. Do it for the baby." The baby, the imaginary hostage. I reached into my pocket, but I did not pull out my checkbook. I pulled out a handkerchief and wiped my forehead. "I do not have my checkbook with me, Tyrell," I said, "and my bank requires a verbal confirmation for transfers that large. It cannot be done tonight." Tyrell's face fell. He looked like he was going to vomit. "Oh my God, what am I going to do?" "Tell them to wait," I said firmly. "Tell them my gift is coming. Tell them everything will be settled when I get on that stage." Tyrell looked at me, confusion warring with hope. "The gift. The house. Can we sell it that fast?" "Just tell them to wait," I said. "Go back out there. Smile. Do not let Haley see you sweat. I will handle this." Tyrell hugged me. "Thank you, Dad. You are a lifesaver. I love you." He walked back into the ballroom, wiping his eyes, putting the smile back on his face. I watched him go, feeling a physical ache in my chest. He thanked me for saving him, not knowing that the salvation I was bringing was going to burn his world to the ground. I stood there for a moment, alone in the shadows. I was the logistics manager. I moved goods. I solved supply chain issues. But this was the hardest shipment I had ever had to deliver, the delivery of truth. Suddenly the music stopped. The lights in the ballroom dimmed and a spotlight swept across the crowd, searching. "Ladies and gentlemen," the MC's voice boomed over the speakers. "Can I have your attention, please?" The room went quiet. The guests turned toward the stage. "We have reached the highlight of the evening," the MC announced. "I have been told that the father of the groom, Mr. Calvin Rhodes, has a very special, very generous presentation to make. A gift that will start this new couple's life in style." The spotlight found me. It hit me like a physical blow, blinding and hot. The crowd erupted in cheers. They were chanting my name. Calvin. Calvin. I squinted against the light. I saw Haley standing on the dance floor. She was clapping her eyes wide with anticipation. She looked hungry. She looked like a wolf waiting for the lamb to be thrown into the pit. Beside her, George and Martha were grinning, raising their glasses. They thought this was it. The handover. The surrender. I took a deep breath. The air felt heavy, charged with the energy of the impending crash. I reached down and picked up the large gift box I had placed under my table earlier. It was wrapped in silver paper with a massive white bow. It looked heavy. It looked expensive. Haley's eyes locked onto the box. She licked her lips. I began to walk. The walk to the stage was only 50 feet, but it felt like miles. Every step was heavy. Guests were patting me on the back. Someone shouted, "Way to go." "Pops." I climbed the stairs to the stage. The wooden floorboards creaked under my weight. I walked to the center into the pool of light. I placed the box on the small table next to the microphone stand. The MC handed me the mic. "Give it up for Mr. Rhodes." The applause was deafening. It washed over me, a wave of noise that meant nothing. I looked out at the sea of faces. I saw Tyrell looking hopeful. I saw Haley looking greedy. I saw her fake parents looking smug. I gripped the microphone. My hand was steady. My heart was cold. They wanted a show. They wanted a gift. They wanted a legacy. I was about to give them all three, but it was not the legacy they expected. I looked directly at Haley. She blew me a kiss. I did not return it. I reached for the ribbon on the box. The sound of the crowd began to fade as they waited in breathless anticipation. Haley took a step forward, unable to help herself. I pulled the ribbon. The bow fell away. I opened the lid. Inside there was no deed. There were no keys. There was only a black remote control and a small high-definition projector unit. I picked up the remote. The crowd looked confused. Haley frowned. I brought the microphone to my lips. "My son thinks I am here to give him a house," I said. My voice was deep, filling the room. "He thinks I am here to give him a future." I paused. The silence was absolute. "But a house built on sand will fall," I continued. "And a marriage built on lies is not a marriage. It is a crime scene." Haley's smile vanished. She took a step back. I turned to the projection screen that had been set up for the slideshow of childhood photos. I pointed the remote. "I am not here to give you a penthouse," I said. "I am here to give you the truth." I pressed the button. The screen flickered to life. And the feast for the vultures was officially over. The hunt had begun. The microphone felt cold and heavy in my hand like a loaded weapon. I stood alone in the center of the stage, blinded by the spotlight that cut through the darkness of the ballroom. Below me, the sea of faces was a blur of anticipation. They were waiting for the heartwarming speech. They were waiting for the tears of joy. They were waiting for the moment the generous father hands over the keys to the castle and fades into the background. I looked down at Haley. She was standing next to Tyrell, her hands clasped together in a pose of fake humility. But her eyes were locked on the silver box on the table next to me. She was not looking at me. She was looking at her prize. She was mentally decorating the penthouse already. She was probably deciding which wall to knock down and which of my wife's favorite paintings to throw in the trash. I cleared my throat. The sound echoed through the massive room, silencing the murmurs of the crowd. "I am not here to make a toast," I said. My voice was low and steady, devoid of the warmth they expected. The smile on Tyrell's face faltered slightly. He looked confused. He took a half step forward as if he wanted to guide me back to the script, but I did not look at him. I looked straight at the woman in the white dress. "I want to tell you a story." I continued. "It is a story my father told me when I was a boy growing up in a neighborhood not too different from where Haley says she is from." Haley stiffened. Her eyes narrowed. She sensed the shift in the air. The predator in her woke up realizing the prey was not acting according to plan. "There was a farmer," I said, gripping the microphone tighter. "It was a cold winter just like this one. The farmer was walking through his field when he saw a snake frozen in the snow. The snake was stiff. It was dying. It looked helpless." I paused. The room was deadly silent. You could hear a pin drop on the carpet. The guests glanced at each other, wondering where this was going. This was not the usual wedding banter. "The farmer was a kind man," I went on. "He felt pity for the creature. He picked it up. He put it inside his coat next to his warm skin. He brought it into his home. He fed it. He nursed it back to health. He introduced it to his children." I looked at Tyrell. He was pale now. He was staring at me, his mouth slightly open. "And do you know what happened when the snake got strong again?" I asked into the silence. I leaned forward, staring directly into Haley's blue eyes. "It bit the farmer. It sank its fangs deep into the chest of the man who saved it. And as the farmer lay dying, his venom-filled blood turning cold, he asked the snake, 'Why? I saved you. I loved you. Why did you do this?' I let the question hang in the air for a long moment, and the snake looked at him and said, 'You knew what I was when you picked me up.'" A gasp rippled through the front row. Haley's face lost all its color. She took a step back, clutching her bouquet so hard the stems snapped. She knew. She knew exactly who the snake was. I turned away from her and looked at the silver box. "My son thinks I am here to give him a gift," I said, my voice rising slightly. "He thinks I am here to give him a set of keys. He thinks I am here to secure his future." I reached out and placed my hand on the lid of the box. But a father's job is not to give his son what he wants. A father's job is to give his son what he needs. And tonight, my son does not need a house. He needs sight. He needs to see the world as it really is, not as he wishes it to be. I ripped the silver bow off the box. The sound of the tearing paper was loud in the quiet room. I lifted the lid. Haley took a step forward, her hand raised. "Calvin, wait," she said, her voice sharp with panic. "Maybe we should do this later." "You are tired. You are not making sense." I ignored her. I reached into the box. I did not pull out a keychain. I did not pull out a deed. I pulled out a small black remote control. Tyrell frowned. "Dad, what is that?" I pointed the remote at the large white projection screen that had been set up behind the stage. It was meant to show a montage of Tyrell and Haley's childhood photos. Sweet memories. Happy times. "I am giving you the truth, son," I said. I pressed the button. The screen flickered to life. A beam of light shot through the darkness, illuminating the dust motes dancing in the air. The image that appeared on the screen was not a baby photo. It was not a picture of a first date. It was a bank statement. The font was large and clear, high definition. Every number was sharp enough to cut. The header read, "Chase Sapphire Preferred. Account holder Haley Miller." The crowd murmured. People squinted. Someone in the back asked, "What is that?" I pressed the button again. The image zoomed in. It showed a series of transactions from last month. October 12th, the Golden Chip Casino. Withdrawal, $5,000. October 14th, online transfer. Recipient Lucas Rossi, $10,000. October 15th, the Golden Chip Casino. Withdrawal, $8,000. The murmurs turned into a roar. I heard shock. I heard laughter. I heard disbelief. I spoke over the noise, my voice booming. "You told my son you were an orphan, Haley. You told him you had no family. You told him you were saving every penny for your future children." I pressed the button again. A new slide appeared. It was a credit report, a disaster of red ink, collections agencies, defaulted loans, and right at the top a lien against a property in Chicago that she claimed she never owned. "Who is Lucas Rossi?" I asked. "Is he your brother? Is he your cousin? Or is he the man you transfer $10,000 to every time you manage to squeeze some cash out of my son?" Haley screamed. It was a primal sound, a sound of pure rage. "Turn it off!" she shrieked. Her face was twisted into a mask of ugliness. The angel was gone. The demon was out. She ran toward the stage. She scrambled up the stairs, tripping on her expensive dress. She lunged for me, trying to grab the remote. "Turn it off, you crazy old man," she yelled, clawing at my arm. But I was ready. I was a logistics manager. I knew how to handle cargo. I stepped aside easily, letting her momentum carry her past me. She stumbled and fell onto the wooden floor of the stage. I did not stop. I pressed the button again. The screen changed. Now it was a series of text messages, screenshots taken from a phone she thought was secure. The contact name was Lucas. The message read, "He is buying it. The old man is suspicious, but the son is a complete idiot. I will have the deed by Saturday. Get the car ready." The crowd went wild. Guests were standing up. Phones were out recording everything. This was better than any reality TV show. This was raw destruction. Tyrell was standing at the foot of the stage. He was not looking at me. He was looking at the screen. His mouth was open. His eyes were filled with tears. He looked like a man who had just been shot and was waiting to feel the pain. Haley scrambled to her feet. She looked at the crowd, then at Tyrell. She saw her world collapsing. "It is fake," she screamed, pointing at the screen. "He photoshopped it. He hates me. He has always hated me." Tyrell, do not look at it. She ran to the edge of the stage, reaching down for Tyrell. "Baby, please, you know me. You know I love you. He is trying to frame me." I pressed the button one more time. The screen went black for a second. Then a video file began to play. It was grainy footage, security camera footage, but the timestamp was clear, 2 days ago. The location was the parking lot of a seedy motel on the outskirts of Atlanta. In the video, Haley was standing next to a car. A man was with her. They were arguing. She handed him a thick envelope. He counted the cash inside. Then he leaned in and kissed her. It was not a friendly kiss, it was the kiss of a lover. The man turned his face toward the camera. It was Lucas. The same Lucas she had just wired money to. The ballroom erupted. It was chaos. People were shouting. Haley's fake parents, George and Martha, were trying to sneak out the side exit, but a group of Tyrell's college football friends blocked their path, crossing their arms. I looked down at Haley. She was frozen. She stared at the video of herself kissing another man while wearing the engagement ring my son had paid for. The lie was dead. The snake was exposed. I lowered the microphone. My hand was shaking now, but not from fear, from the adrenaline of the kill. I looked at Tyrell. He looked at me. Then he looked at Haley. The love in his eyes was gone. It was replaced by a horror so deep it looked like madness. Haley turned to him. "Tyrell, wait. Let me explain. That is my cousin. We are very close." "Cousin," Tyrell whispered. His voice was broken. "You kissed your cousin like that." Haley reached for him, but he recoiled as if she were made of fire. "Don't touch me," he shouted. His scream echoed through the room louder than my microphone ever could. I stood on the stage holding the remote control like a detonator. I had blown up the bridge. I had destroyed the wedding. I had humiliated my son in front of everyone he knew. But I had saved him. And I wasn't finished yet. I looked at the side door of the ballroom. It opened. Fletcher walked in. And behind him were 2 uniformed officers. I raised the microphone one last time. "I have one more slide," I said. Haley looked at the police. Her eyes went wide. She realized then that this was not just a breakup. This was an arrest. She looked at me, and for the first time I saw true fear. "You old bastard," she hissed. I smiled. A cold, hard smile. "Run," I whispered. But there was nowhere to run. The cage was locked, and I held the only key. The ballroom was in chaos, but for me the world had narrowed down to the 3 of us standing in the wreckage of a wedding that never should have happened. Haley was on the floor where she had fallen, but she did not stay down for long. She was a survivor. She was a cockroach who knew how to scatter when the lights came on, and she knew exactly which dark corner to run to. She scrambled to her knees, and then she did something that chilled me to the bone. She burst into tears. It was a performance worthy of an Academy Award. Her shoulders shook. Her hands covered her face. She let out a wail of pure anguish that cut through the murmurs of the crowd. She looked up at Tyrell, her mascara running down her cheeks, making her look like a tragic heroine in a gothic novel. "Tyrell," she sobbed, reaching out for his trouser leg. "Look at him. Look at your father. He is smiling. He is enjoying this." Tyrell looked at me. His face was a mask of confusion and pain. He looked at the screen where the video of Lucas and Haley kissing was frozen, and then he looked at his father. He wanted to believe me, but he needed to believe her. It is the curse of a good heart. It always looks for the good in others even when staring into the face of evil. "It is fake," Haley screamed, pointing a trembling finger at the screen. "He hired actors Tyrell. He used that deepfake technology everyone talks about. He has been planning this for months. He hates me because I am white. He hates me because I am poor. He cannot stand that you love someone more than you love his money." She stood up slowly, clutching her stomach with both hands. She grimaced as if in physical pain. "My baby," she gasped. "Oh God, Tyrell, the stress. He is hurting the baby." That was the trigger. The moment she mentioned the child, Tyrell snapped. His protective instinct kicked in, overriding his logic. He turned on me. His eyes, which had been filled with doubt a moment ago, were now burning with anger. "Dad, turn it off," he shouted. His voice cracked. "Are you insane? Look at her. She is pregnant. You are stressing her out. If something happens to my son, I will never forgive you." I stood there holding the remote control, feeling the weight of his hatred. It hit me harder than any physical blow. My own son was looking at me like I was a monster. He was defending the wolf because it was wearing sheep's clothing. "You fabricated this," Tyrell yelled, stepping between me and Haley, acting as her human shield. "You spent all this time making fake videos instead of getting to know her. How could you be so cruel? How could you be so jealous? You are alone, so you want me to be alone too." The words were like acid. Jealous, cruel, alone. Haley peeked out from behind Tyrell's back. I saw her face. For a split second, the mask slipped. She smirked. It was a tiny, triumphant twitch of her lips. She thought she had him. She thought the baby card was the trump card that would win the game. I looked at Tyrell. I saw the desperation in his stance. He was clinging to the idea of the baby. The baby was his future. The baby was his legacy. He could forgive the spending. He could perhaps even forgive the lie about the cousin if she spun it right. But he would never abandon his child. I knew then that I had to use the nuclear option. I had to destroy the one thing he was fighting for. I had to kill his dream to save his life. "I am sorry, Tyrell." I said, my voice soft but amplified by the microphone in my other hand. "I am not doing this because I am jealous. I am doing this because I love you enough to break your heart." I raised the remote. Haley saw the movement. Her eyes went wide. She knew what was coming. She knew what was in that third file. "Don't you dare," she hissed, stepping out from behind Tyrell. "Stop him, Tyrell. Smash that projector." Tyrell lunged for the table, trying to reach the power cord. But I was faster. I pressed the button. The video on the screen changed. The image of the motel parking lot vanished. It was replaced by the interior of a medical clinic. It was bright, sterile, and unmistakably real. The timestamp in the corner read 4 days ago. The camera angle was from a buttonhole camera, likely worn by the private investigator Lucas had hired, or perhaps a bribed staff member. It showed Haley sitting across from a doctor. She was not crying. She was not emotional. She looked bored. She was checking her nails. The audio crackled to life, filling the silent ballroom. "I need the paperwork to look authentic," Haley's voice said. "Clear, sharp, undeniable. It needs to say 8 weeks. That is the timeline that matches." The doctor, who was off-screen, hesitated. "I can give you a printout of a generic ultrasound, Ms. Miller. We sell them as souvenirs. But putting a false date on a medical record is illegal." Haley laughed in the video. It was a cold, dry sound. "I am not asking you to file it with the state. I just need a piece of paper to show a gullible old man and his idiot son. I will pay you double in cash." The crowd in the ballroom gasped. Tyrell stopped moving. His hand was inches from the power cord, but he froze. He stared at the screen. In the video, the doctor sighed. "And regarding the other matter, you mentioned you wanted to reverse the procedure." Haley waved her hand dismissively. "God, no. I hate kids. They are loud, expensive parasites. I just need them to think I am pregnant until the check clears." Tyrell's knees buckled. He grabbed the edge of the table to hold himself up. He looked like he had been shot in the gut. But the video was not done. The doctor asked just to confirm for our records. "You had a bilateral tubal ligation 5 years ago in Chicago." "Correct." "Yes," Haley snapped. "I got my tubes tied when I was 23. Best investment I ever made. No accidents, no traps, just freedom. Now give me the damn ultrasound picture." I pressed the pause button. The image on the screen froze on Haley's face. She looked annoyed, impatient, and utterly barren of any maternal instinct. The silence in the ballroom was heavy. It was the silence of a grave. I looked at Tyrell. He was not looking at the screen anymore. He was looking at Haley's stomach. He was looking at the place where he thought his son was growing. He was looking at the flat stomach that she had let him touch. He was remembering the nights he had talked to that belly making promises to a ghost. There was no baby. There never was a baby. There never would be a baby. The realization hit him like a physical wave of nausea. He gagged, covering his mouth with his hand. He stumbled back away from her as if she were radioactive. Tyrell, Haley whispered. Her voice was small, terrified. It was the first time she sounded truly afraid. Not fake afraid, real afraid. She knew there was no coming back from this. She reached out for him. Tyrell, baby, listen, I can explain. I was going to reverse it. I wanted to surprise you. Don't, Tyrell choked out. He looked at her, and for the first time he saw her. He did not see the angel. He did not see the victim. He saw the monster. He saw the woman who had looked him in the eye and lied about the most sacred thing a human being can create. You let me name him, Tyrell whispered, his voice breaking into 1,000 pieces. We picked out names. You bought a crib. You let me paint the nursery. He stepped back again, knocking over a chair. It was all a game to you. My life. My child. It was just a game for money. Haley's face hardened. The tears stopped instantly. The mask did not just slip, it shattered. She realized the act was over. The soft whimpering woman vanished and something ugly and sharp took her place. Yes, it was a game, she spat out. And you were so easy to play, Tyrell. You were pathetic. You were so desperate to be a man you let me lead you around by the nose. She turned to me. Her eyes were black holes of rage. This is your fault, you old bastard, she screamed. She did not run away. She did not faint. She attacked. With a shriek of pure fury, she lunged across the gap between us. She was not a lady in a wedding dress anymore. She was a cornered animal. Her hands were claws reaching for my face, reaching for the eyes that had seen too much. She slammed into me, knocking the microphone stand over with a deafening screech of feedback. I fell back against the projection screen, the fabric tearing under our weight. She was on top of me, scratching, hitting, screaming obscenities that would make a sailor blush. You ruined everything, she shrieked. I had it. I had the money. I had the house. It was mine. I raised my arms to protect my face, feeling her nails digging into my forearms, drawing blood. But I did not fight back. I did not need to, because in her rage she was confessing. Every scream was an admission. Every blow was proof. I lay there taking the punishment, feeling the sting of her hatred, but feeling a strange sense of peace in my heart, because I looked past her flailing arms and I saw Tyrell. He was standing there watching. He was watching his wife try to maul his father. He was watching the woman he loved turn into a demon. And I knew that the spell was finally broken. The poison was being drawn out. It hurt. God, it hurt him. But he was free. Suddenly, strong hands pulled her off me. It was not the police. Not yet. It was Tyrell. He grabbed her by the waist and threw her back, not gently. She stumbled and fell onto the stage, her expensive dress ripping. Get away from him, Tyrell roared. He stood over me, his chest heaving, his tuxedo torn, his face wet with tears. But he was standing between me and her. He was protecting me. Haley looked up at him, panting, her hair wild, her lipstick smeared. Tyrell, she gasped, trying one last time to manipulate him. He attacked me. You saw it. Shut up, Tyrell said. His voice was cold, dead. Just shut up. He reached down and helped me up. His hand was strong. He pulled me to my feet, and for a moment he just held onto my arm, gripping it like it was the only solid thing in the world. Are you okay, Dad? He asked quietly. I nodded, wiping a streak of blood from my cheek. I am fine, son. We stood there side by side, looking down at the woman who had tried to destroy us. She looked small now, pathetic. And then the side doors burst open again. The police were not waiting anymore. They were swarming the room. But they were not the only ones. Lucas walked in. He looked thin and pale, walking with a cane, but his head was high. He walked straight toward the stage. Haley saw him and she stopped screaming. She went completely still. It was over. The checkmate was complete. I straightened my jacket, feeling the sting of the scratches on my arms. They were battle scars, and I would wear them proudly, because I had won. Not the house, not the money. I had won my son back. The ballroom was a wreck of shattered crystal and broken illusions. Two burly security guards who had been standing by the perimeter finally decided to earn their paychecks. They rushed the stage, their heavy boots thudding against the wooden floorboards. They did not grab me. They grabbed the bride. It took both of them to restrain her. Haley was thrashing like a wild animal caught in a snare, her expensive white dress now torn and stained with the wine she had knocked over during her assault. She was screaming, but the words were no longer obscenities. They were legal threats. "I will sue you," she shrieked, her voice raw and scratching against her throat. "I will sue you for defamation of character. I will sue you for slander. I will take every penny you have hidden in those accounts, Calvin. You think you are smart? You just broke the law. You cannot show fake videos in a public forum. I will own you." She twisted in the grip of the guards, her eyes wild, searching the room for an ally. But there were no allies left. The guests were standing in stunned silence, their phones raised, recording the meltdown of the season. Her parents, George and Martha, had disappeared, slipping out the side exit the moment the violence started, proving that rats really do flee a sinking ship first. I stood next to Tyrell. He was shaking. His hands were clenched into fists at his sides, not in aggression, but in a desperate attempt to hold himself together. He looked at the woman he had married less than an hour ago. He did not see a wife. He saw a stranger who was threatening to destroy his father. "Let her go," I told the guards calmly. My voice was steady, a stark contrast to her hysteria. "She is not going anywhere." The guards looked at me, then at Tyrell. Tyrell nodded. They released her, stepping back but staying close, ready to pounce if she tried to attack again. Haley smoothed her dress, trying to regain a shred of dignity. She took a deep breath, her chest heaving. She pointed a manicured finger at me. "You are going to regret this," she hissed. "You have no proof. Those videos are deepfakes. Any lawyer will tear them apart in court. I am the victim here. I am a pregnant woman who was assaulted by her father-in-law on her wedding day. That is the story the news will run." She turned to the crowd, putting her hands out in a pleading gesture. "You all saw it, right?" she implored. "You saw him attack me with his lies. You saw him ruin my day." A few people shifted uncomfortably, but no one spoke. The seed of doubt I had planted was growing into a forest of suspicion. I looked at her, feeling a strange sense of pity. She was fighting so hard for a life that was already gone. She was trying to bail water out of a boat that had already split in half. "You can threaten me all you want, Hannah," I said, using her real name again. It hit her like a slap. But the law does not care about your threats. It cares about facts. "And I have one more fact to introduce." Haley froze. She looked at me, her eyes darting to the screen behind me. She thought I had another video. She thought I had another bank statement. But I did not need technology for this part. I needed a ghost. I looked toward the heavy double doors at the back of the ballroom. They were the doors she had walked through in triumph just an hour ago. Now they were the gates of judgment. Fletcher, my lawyer, pushed the doors open. He stepped inside looking sharp and serious in his charcoal suit. He was not alone. Behind him walked a man who looked like he had clawed his way out of a grave. He was thin, his suit hanging loosely on his frame. He walked with a cane, his steps slow and deliberate. His skin was pale, almost translucent under the ballroom lights. But his eyes were alive. They burned with a fire that had been stoked by years of betrayal and pain. It was Lucas. The room went deadly silent, the kind of silence where you can hear a heartbreak. Haley turned around to see what I was looking at. When she saw him, the blood drained from her face so fast I thought she was going to faint. Her knees buckled, and she grabbed the edge of a table to stay upright. Her mouth opened, but no sound came out. It was a silent scream of pure terror. She was looking at the husband she thought she had killed, or at least the husband she had left to die. Lucas walked down the aisle. The guests parted for him like the Red Sea. They stared at him, sensing that this was the climax of the tragedy. They did not know who he was, but they knew he was the executioner. He reached the foot of the stage. He did not look at me. He did not look at Tyrell. He looked only at her. "Hello," Hannah Lucas said. His voice was raspy, damaged by the poison that had scarred his throat, but it carried to every corner of the room. Haley shook her head. No, it is not possible. You are in Chicago. You are sick. You are dead." Lucas finished the sentence for her. "Is that what you were hoping for? Is that why you stopped answering the phone 3 years ago? Is that why you emptied the joint account and vanished while I was in the ICU? Haley backed away until she hit the projection screen. There was nowhere left to go. Lucas climbed the stairs to the stage. It was a struggle for him. Every step was a battle against the damage she had done to his body. Tyrell stepped forward to help him, grabbing his arm to hoist him up. "Thank you, son," Lucas said to Tyrell. He looked at my boy with genuine sympathy. "I am sorry I am late." It took a long time to gather the strength to face her. Lucas turned to me. I handed him the microphone. My hand brushed his. His skin was cold, but his grip was firm. He turned to the crowd. "My name is Lucas Rossi," he said, "and according to the state of Illinois, I am that woman's husband." A gasp ripped through the room. The cameras flashed blindingly. The whispers turned into a roar of shock. "Bigamy!" The word floated through the air like smoke. "But that is the least of her crimes," Lucas continued. He pointed the cane at Haley. 4 years ago, I was a healthy man. I owned a construction company. I had money. I had a future. And then I met Hannah. She told me she loved me. She told me she wanted to take care of me. He took a step closer to her. She flinched as if he had struck her. She started making me tea every night, he said. A special blend, she called it. For my stress. It tasted bitter like almonds, but I drank it because I trusted her, because I loved her. The guests were listening with horrified fascination. This was a true crime documentary playing out in real time. I started getting sick, Lucas said. My hair fell out. My skin turned gray. My nerves felt like they were on fire. The doctors could not figure it out. They thought it was a virus. They thought it was autoimmune. He paused, letting the horror sink in. It was arsenic, he whispered. Rat poison. She was feeding it to me spoon by spoon, day by day, watching me wither, watching me die. And while I lay in that hospital bed, too weak to move, she brought a notary in. She told me I needed to sign a power of attorney so she could pay the medical bills. Tyrell let out a choked sob. He recognized the pattern, the rush to sign documents, the pressure, the fake concern. It was exactly what she had done to him with the house. I signed it, Lucas said, and the next day my accounts were empty, and she was gone. He turned to Haley. His eyes were wet with tears, but they were not tears of sadness. They were tears of rage. I survived, Hannah. It took me 2 years to learn how to walk again. It took me 3 years to get my voice back. But I survived for this moment. I survived to make sure you never do this to another family again. Haley was shaking her head violently. "He is lying!" she screamed, but her voice was thin and weak. "He is crazy. He is an abusive ex. He is making it up." Lucas reached into his jacket pocket. He pulled out a folded piece of paper. "This is the toxicology report from Cook County Hospital," he said. "And this is the police report filed 3 years ago. There is an active warrant for your arrest in Chicago for attempted murder." He threw the papers at her feet. They scattered on the floor like white feathers. The crowd erupted. People were running for the exits, now terrified of being associated with a murderer. Others were filming, shouting questions. The chaos was absolute. Haley looked at the papers. She looked at Lucas. She looked at the guests who were looking at her with pure revulsion. She realized the legal threat she had made moments ago was a joke. She wasn't going to sue anyone. She was going to fight for her life in a courtroom, and she was going to lose. Tyrell stepped forward. He walked past Lucas. He walked right up to Haley. She looked up at him, her eyes pleading. "Tyrell, please. You know me. I am your wife." Tyrell looked down at her. His face was like stone. "You are not my wife," he said. "You are a sickness, and I am finally cured." He reached down to his hand. He pulled off the ring she had placed there less than an hour ago. He threw it at her. It hit her in the chest and bounced away, lost in the folds of her ruined dress. "Get out of my sight," Tyrell whispered. Haley looked around. She was trapped. The security guards were blocking the stage stairs. The guests were blocking the floor. Lucas was standing there like the Grim Reaper. And I was standing there, the architect of her destruction. She let out a scream of frustration. It was the sound of a predator who had finally been caught in her own trap. She tried to run. She tried to jump off the side of the stage, hoping to disappear into the kitchen, hoping to find a back door, a window, anything. But she didn't make it. Because as she landed on the floor, the side doors burst open again. This time, it wasn't a lawyer, it wasn't a ghost, it was the police. Blue and red lights flashed through the windows, painting the ballroom in the colors of justice. 4 officers marched in their hands on their belts. Haley froze. She looked at the officers. She looked at me. I raised my glass of sparkling water from the table where I had left it. I toasted her. "Goodbye, Hannah," I mouthed. The officers moved in. The circle was closed. The game was over. And the checkmate was absolute. The ballroom was now awash in a chaotic strobe of red and blue lights flashing through the floor-to-ceiling windows. The silence of the stunned guests was replaced by the wailing of sirens that grew louder with every passing second. It was the sound of reality crashing into the fantasy world Haley had built. She looked around the room like a trapped animal in a cage. Her eyes darted from the stage where Lucas stood like a specter of her past to the main doors where my lawyer Fletcher was holding the line. She realized with terrifying clarity that her charm and her lies were no longer currency here. The time for negotiation was over. The time for consequences had begun. She hiked up the skirt of her torn wedding dress, revealing the expensive designer heels Tyrell had paid for. She did not look at her husband. She did not look at me. She looked at the emergency exit sign glowing green above the kitchen doors. It was her only way out. She bolted. For a woman in a heavy gown, she moved with shocking speed, fueled by the adrenaline of pure panic. She knocked over a waiter, sending a tray of champagne flutes shattering onto the dance floor. She shoved an elderly aunt out of her way. She was running for her life. But I had anticipated this. In my 40 years of logistics, I learned that you never leave a loading dock unguarded. I had studied the floor plan of this resort 2 days ago. I knew exactly where that kitchen door led. It led to the service corridor, which opened out into the rear loading bay, and that was exactly where I had told the police to station their second unit. Haley reached the double doors and slammed her body against them, bursting into the kitchen. I watched from the stage, my heart beating a steady rhythm of grim satisfaction. I did not need to run after her. I did not need to shout. I just waited. 5 seconds later, the kitchen doors swung open again, but this time Haley was walking backward. She was retreating. Following her into the ballroom were 4 uniformed police officers. Their hands rested on their holsters. Their faces were impassive. They were not here for a wedding. They were here for a felon. Haley backed up until she bumped into a table. She spun around looking for another escape route, but the main doors opened and 4 more officers marched in. She was surrounded. The circle of blue uniforms tightened around her, cutting off every angle of escape. The guests parted, forming a wide perimeter, watching the bride get cornered. It was a humiliating end to a day that was supposed to be her coronation. The lead officer, a tall man with a jaw like granite, stepped forward. He held a piece of paper in his hand. He did not look at the guests. He looked straight at the woman shivering in the ruined white dress. "Hannah Marie Miller," he said, his voice booming through the quiet room. Haley flinched. The use of her real name stripped away the last layer of her disguise. She was not Haley Rhodes, the wealthy socialite. She was Hannah Miller, the grifter from Chicago. "Put your hands behind your back," the officer ordered. "No," Haley whispered. She shook her head, her eyes wide and wet. "You have the wrong person. My name is Haley. I am the victim here. That man on the stage attacked me." The officer did not blink. "We have a warrant for your arrest issued by the state of Illinois and reciprocating warrants here in Georgia. Turn around. Now." Haley looked at Tyrell. She looked at him with a desperation that was painful to watch. "Tyrell," she screamed, "do something. They are arresting your wife. Tell them who I am. Tell them I am pregnant." Tyrell stood next to me. He did not move. He looked at the woman he had promised to love and cherish just an hour ago. But the illusion was gone. He saw the rat trapped in the corner. He saw the lies. He saw the cruelty. He slowly shook his head. "You are not my wife," Tyrell said, his voice hollow. "And there is no baby." The officer grabbed Haley's wrist. She screamed a high-pitched sound of fury and fear. She tried to pull away, scratching at the officer's arm. It was a mistake. 2 other officers moved in instantly. They spun her around, forcing her arms behind her back. The sound of the handcuffs clicking shut echoed through the ballroom. It was a sharp, metallic sound. Click, click. The sound was final. It was the period at the end of a long and terrible sentence. The lead officer raised the paper and began to read. He read loudly so everyone could hear. He wanted there to be no doubt about who this woman was. "You are under arrest for the crime of bigamy," the officer stated. entering into a marriage contract while legally married to another person. Haley was sobbing now, her face pressed against the shoulder of the officer restraining her. "It is a mistake," she wailed. "You are also under arrest for 3 counts of wire fraud and bank fraud," the officer continued. He paused and looked up at Lucas standing on the stage. "And we are executing an outstanding warrant from Cook County, Illinois for attempted murder in the 1st degree." The room gasped. The words hung in the air heavy and dark. Attempted murder. It was one thing to be a thief. It was another to be a killer. Haley stopped struggling. The weight of the charges hit her. This was not a night in jail. This was life in prison. This was the end of the road. The officer grabbed her arm and turned her around to face the door. "Let's go," he said. And that was when the mask fell completely. Haley stopped crying. The tears vanished as if a switch had been flipped. She realized the act was over. The sympathy play had failed. The victim card had been declined. She looked up and her face transformed, her features twisted into a sneer of pure, unadulterated hatred. She looked ugly, not physically but spiritually. The rot that had been hiding beneath the surface finally broke through. She locked eyes with Tyrell. "You stupid, pathetic coward," she spat. Tyrell flinched as if she had thrown a rock at him. "You really thought I loved you?" She laughed, a harsh barking sound. "Look at you. You are weak. You are a spineless little boy living in your daddy's shadow. I never loved you. I laughed at you every time you cried about your feelings. I was repulsed every time you touched me." The crowd murmured in horror. Tyrell's face went white. He looked like he was going to be sick. "I was doing you a favor," Haley screamed as the officers began to drag her toward the exit. "I was going to take the money and leave you. You would have been free. But now look at you. You are nothing. You are a joke." She turned her venom toward me. "And you," she hissed, pulling against the handcuffs to glare at me. "You miserable old fossil. You think you won. You think you saved him. You did not save him. You destroyed him. He will never trust anyone again. He will die alone just like you. I hope you rot in hell, Calvin. I hope you die screaming." I looked at her calmly. Her words were poison, but I had the antidote. I had the truth. I walked to the edge of the stage and looked down at her. "I may die alone, Hannah," I said, my voice steady. "But I will die with a clean conscience. And I will die free. You will die in a cage wearing a jumpsuit that matches your soul." Haley let out a primal scream of rage. She tried to lunge at me, but the officers held her tight. They dragged her backward, her heels scraping against the floor, leaving black marks on the polished wood. Her white dress was ruined, torn, and dirty. It looked like a shroud. She continued to scream obscenities, cursing Tyrell, cursing me, cursing Lucas, cursing the world. She blamed everyone but herself. She was a narcissist to the bitter end, unable to accept that her own greed was the architect of her downfall. The officers hauled her through the double doors. The crowd parted wide, terrified to touch her. As she passed the threshold, she looked back one last time. Her eyes met mine. There was no regret, only hate. Pure, cold hate. The doors swung shut, cutting off her screams. Silence returned to the ballroom, but it was not the awkward silence of before. It was the silence of a storm that had finally passed. The air felt lighter. The pressure was gone. I looked at Tyrell. He was standing perfectly still, staring at the doors where his wife had just disappeared. He was trembling. I stepped down from the stage and walked over to him. I did not say a word. I just stood next to him, letting him feel my presence. I let him know that even though the storm had destroyed his house, his foundation was still standing. Tyrell looked at me. His eyes were red, his face streaked with tears. "She hated me," he whispered. "She really hated me." "She did not hate you, son," I said gently. "She did not know you. To hate someone, you have to see them as a person. To her, you were just a target. You were a means to an end." "It was never personal, Tyrell. It was just business." Tyrell let out a shuddering breath. He looked down at his hand where the ring used to be. The skin was pale where the gold band had sat for less than an hour. I felt a hand on my shoulder. It was Lucas. He had hobbled down from the stage, his cane tapping softly on the floor. "It is over," Calvin Lucas said. His voice was tired but peaceful. "She is gone. She can never hurt us again." I nodded. "It is over." I looked around the room. The guests were starting to whisper again, but the tone had changed. They were not gossiping. They were traumatized, but they were also relieved. They had witnessed a tragedy, but they had also witnessed a rescue. Fletcher walked over to us, putting his phone in his pocket. "The district attorney is on the line," he said. "They are denying bail. Given the flight risk and the severity of the charges in Illinois, she is not getting out. She is going straight to maximum security." I let out a long breath that I felt like I had been holding for weeks. The logistics were complete. The package had been delivered to the authorities. The threat had been neutralized. I put my arm around Tyrell's shoulders. He leaned into me, his weight heavy against my side. He was broken, yes, but broken things can be mended. Dead things cannot. And today I had kept him from becoming a dead thing. "Let's go home, son," I said. Tyrell nodded, wiping his face with his sleeve. "Yeah, Dad. Let's go home." We turned our backs on the ruined wedding. We walked out of the ballroom, leaving the flowers and the cake and the shattered glass behind. We walked out into the cool night air where the police lights were still flashing, painting the world in shades of justice. The silence in the ballroom was worse than the screaming. 10 minutes ago, the room had been a hurricane of flashing lights and shouting voices and the violent unraveling of a criminal life. Now it was just a large, empty room that smelled of stale champagne and dying orchids. The guests had fled. They had scattered like cockroaches the moment the handcuffs clicked shut, desperate to distance themselves from the scandal. My lawyer, Fletcher, had left to follow the police cruiser to the precinct to ensure the charges stuck. Lucas had gone to the hospital to get checked out, his adrenaline finally fading. I was the only one left standing. I looked around the wreckage of the wedding I had paid for with my dignity. Chairs were overturned. The white runner down the aisle was scuffed with black boot marks from the police officers. The cake, a 5-tier monstrosity that cost more than my first car, sat uncut and mocking in the corner. It was a perfect metaphor for the day. Beautiful on the outside, but slowly melting into a sugary mess under the harsh lights. But my eyes were drawn to the center of the dance floor. Tyrell was sitting there. He was not sitting on a chair. He was sitting directly on the polished wood floor, his legs splayed out in front of him, his expensive tuxedo jacket discarded in a heap next to him. He looked small. When he was a boy and he scraped his knee, he would curl up like that, waiting for me to come and pick him up. But he was not a boy anymore. He was a 32-year-old man who had just watched his wife get dragged away in shackles. He was not crying. That was what scared me the most. If he were crying, it would mean he was processing the pain. Instead, he was staring at nothing. His eyes were wide and vacant, fixed on a spot on the floor where a glass had shattered. He looked like a soldier who had survived an explosion but left his soul back in the crater. I walked toward him. My footsteps echoed loudly in the cavernous room. I stopped a few feet away, giving him space. I did not know if he wanted to hit me or hug me. I prepared myself for both. "Tyrell," I said softly. He did not blink. He did not move. He just sat there, breathing shallow breaths that barely moved his chest. I took a step closer. "Son, we should go. There is nothing left to do here." Tyrell slowly raised his head. When his eyes met mine, I felt a physical jolt. There was no warmth in them. There was a dull, flat mixture of exhaustion and accusation. Why, he croaked. His voice was hoarse, as if he had been screaming for hours. I waited, letting him find the words. "Why did you wait?" Tyrell asked. He pushed himself up a little, leaning back on his hands. "You had the videos. You had the marriage certificate. You knew she was a fraud before I even walked down that aisle." He let out a short, bitter laugh that sounded like dry leaves crunching. "You sat there, Dad. You sat in the front row, and you watched me say my vows. You watched me put a ring on her finger. You watched me kiss her. You let me marry a monster." His voice rose, getting louder and sharper. "Why didn't you stop me in the dressing room? Why didn't you pull me aside in the parking lot? Why did you let me go through with it? Do you have any idea what that felt like? To find out my wife is a criminal 5 minutes after I married her." He scrambled to his feet, swaying slightly. He pointed a shaking finger at me. "You wanted to humiliate me. That is it, isn't it? You wanted to teach me a lesson. You wanted to show everyone that Tyrell is an idiot who needs his daddy to save him." I looked at my son. I saw the raw, open wound of his pride. He was lashing out because it was easier to be angry at me than to face the reality of what he had done. I did not flinch. I did not apologize. I was a logistics man, and I dealt in facts. "I did not do this to humiliate you, Tyrell," I said, my voice steady and calm. I did it to keep her in a cage. Tyrell wiped his mouth with the back of his hand. What does that mean? If I had showed you that video in the dressing room, what would have happened? I asked. Think, Tyrell. Use your head. He stared at me, breathing hard. I will tell you what would have happened. I continued, taking a step forward. You would have confronted her. She would have cried. She would have made up a lie about how the video was out of context or how Lucas was an abusive ex-boyfriend stalking her. And you know what? You might have believed her. I wouldn't have. Tyrell protested weakly. Yes, you would have, I said, cutting him off. Because you loved her, and love makes us blind. But even if you did believe me, even if you called off the wedding right then and there, what would be the crime? Tyrell blinked, confused by the question. There would be no crime, I answered for him. It would just be a breakup, a bad breakup. She would walk away. She would move to another city. She would change her name again, and in 6 months she would find another victim. Maybe she would even come back for you when your guard was down. I pointed at the door where the police had exited. But by letting you say I do, by letting you sign that marriage license while she was still married to Lucas, she committed a felony. Bigamy is a crime, Tyrell. Fraud is a crime. By letting the wedding finish, we gave the police exactly what they needed to lock her away for 15 years. I lowered my hand. I did not wait to hurt you, son. I waited to make sure she could never hurt you again. I needed the trap to snap shut tight, and the only way to do that was to use the wedding as the bait. Tyrell stood there processing the logic. He looked at the empty altar. He looked at the spot where he had promised his life to a woman who wanted to end it. But it hurts, Dad, he whispered. His voice broke. God, it hurts so much. I know, I said. I stepped closer until I was right in front of him. I know it feels like you are dying, but you are not. You are waking up. Tyrell looked down at his feet. He began to shake. It started in his hands and spread to his shoulders until his whole body was vibrating with the force of his shame. I said terrible things to you, he mumbled. He was talking to his shoes, unable to look me in the face. I stood there silent, listening. In the dressing room, Tyrell continued the words, tumbling out fast and messy. I called you a bitter old man. I said you were jealous. I said you didn't want me to be happy. He looked up at me, his eyes filling with fresh tears. She was standing there lying to my face, planning to kill me for insurance money, and I defended her. I chose her over you. I pushed you away. I treated you like an enemy. He covered his face with his hands, digging his fingers into his scalp. I am so stupid, Dad. I am so incredibly stupid. How could I be so blind? How can you even look at me right now? I reached out and took his hands, pulling them away from his face. I gripped his shoulders hard, grounding him. You are not stupid, Tyrell, I said firmly. You are human. You have a good heart. And predators like Hannah prey on good hearts. They look for kindness and they use it as a weapon. You did not fail because you were weak. You failed because you were trusting. I looked him deep in the eyes, willing him to believe me. I do not care about the insults. I do not care what you said in that dressing room. That was her talking, not you. Tyrell sniffed, wiping his nose on his sleeve like a little boy. I almost lost everything he said. The house, the money, my life. You lost nothing, I said. The house is safe in the trust. The money is safe, and your life is just beginning. I let go of his shoulders and held out my hand. Come on, let's get out of here. This place smells like a lie. Tyrell looked at my hand. He hesitated for a second, looking at the wreckage of the ballroom one last time. He looked at the shattered glass and the torn decorations. He was leaving his fantasy behind. He was leaving the boy who believed in fairy tales behind. He took my hand. His grip was firm. I am sorry, Dad, he said again. I know I said. I squeezed his hand. I know. We turned and walked toward the exit. We walked past the empty tables. We walked past the silent stage. We walked past the spot where Haley had been dragged screaming to her fate. As we reached the double doors, Tyrell stopped. He reached into his pocket and pulled out a small velvet box. It was the box for the groom's ring, the ring Haley had given him. He had taken it off earlier and thrown it, but he must have picked it up when I wasn't looking. He looked at the box for a long moment. Then he walked over to a trash can near the door. He did not throw it with anger. He dropped it with indifference. It landed with a dull thud among the discarded napkins and empty champagne bottles. Good riddance, he whispered. He walked back to me and pushed the doors open. The night air hit us cool and clean. It smelled of rain and asphalt and freedom. The flashing lights were gone. The sirens had faded. There was just the quiet hum of the city and the stars overhead. "Where are we going?" Tyrell asked. I pulled the keys to my old Ford truck out of my pocket. "We are going to get a burger," I said. "A greasy, cheap burger from that diner on 4th Street. And then we are going to go home." Tyrell managed a small, weak smile. It was the first real smile I had seen on his face all day. "A burger sounds good," he said. We walked to the truck, leaving the resort and the nightmare behind us. We were battered. We were bruised. My arms still stung from Haley's scratches, and Tyrell's heart was in pieces. But we were walking together, and as long as we were walking together, there was nothing we could not rebuild. We sat in the cab of my truck with the engine idling. The vibration of the old Ford was a familiar comfort against my back. It was a stark contrast to the plush silk chairs of the ballroom we had just fled, but to me, this felt more like a throne. This was where real business was done. This was where reality lived. Tyrell was staring out the passenger window, watching the city lights blur as I navigated the streets of Atlanta. He looked exhausted. He looked like a man who had gone 12 rounds in a boxing ring and lost every single one of them. He was rubbing his bare ring finger over and over again, a phantom itch from a shackle he had barely escaped. I reached into the glove compartment. It was cluttered with tire gauges and old receipts, but underneath it all was a thick blue folder. I had put it there this morning right next to my pistol. 2 forms of protection, one for the body and one for the future. I pulled the folder out and dropped it onto Tyrell's lap. The sound of the heavy paper hitting his legs made him jump. He looked down at it warily as if it were another bomb waiting to explode. "What is this, Dad?" he asked, his voice raspy. "Is it the bill for the wedding? I told you I will pay you back. I will work double shifts. I will sell my car. I will do whatever it takes." "It is not a bill," I said, keeping my eyes on the road. "Open it." Tyrell hesitated. He opened the folder with trembling fingers. He expected to see a deed. He expected to see a title transfer with his name and Haley's name printed in bold letters. He expected to see the asset he thought he had lost, but he frowned as he read the cover page. "The Rhodes Family Irrevocable Trust," he read aloud. He looked at me, confusion wrinkling his forehead. "I do not understand. Where is the deed to the penthouse?" "Turn the page," I said. He flipped the page. He scanned the legal jargon, the paragraphs of conditions and clauses that my lawyer Fletcher and I had spent months drafting. "The property known as the Buckhead penthouse is solely owned by the trust," Tyrell read slowly. "The beneficiary is Tyrell Rhodes, but the trustee is Calvin Rhodes." He looked up at me. "It says I do not own it," he said. "It says I am just a beneficiary. That means I cannot sell it, I cannot mortgage it, I cannot transfer it." "Exactly," I said. I pulled the truck over into the empty parking lot of a closed shopping center. I put the gear in park and turned to face him. The sodium streetlights cast long orange shadows across the dashboard, illuminating the confusion on his face. "You thought I was going to hand you a deed today," I said. "You thought I was going to give you an asset worth nearly $1 million with no strings attached. And you thought you were going to put Haley's name on it because you loved her." Tyrell looked down, shame flushing his cheeks. "She asked me to," he whispered. "She said it was a sign of trust. She said if I loved her, I would share everything. And if you had," I said, my voice hard, "if you had put her name on that deed, do you know what would have happened tonight?" Tyrell shook his head. "She would still be in jail," I continued. "But she would be in jail owning half of your house. Even from a prison cell, she could have forced a sale. She could have drained the equity to pay for her legal defense. She could have dragged you through court for years, and at the end of it, you would have been homeless and broke." I tapped the blue folder on his lap. "But she could not touch this. An irrevocable trust is a fortress, Tyrell. It is a steel box that no lawyer and no wife and no creditor can break open. The trust owns the house, not you. And since you do not own it, you cannot give it away. You cannot lose it in a divorce. You cannot gamble it away. And most importantly, you cannot be manipulated into signing it over to a woman with a pretty smile and a black heart." Tyrell ran his hand over the paper. The realization was washing over him. "You never intended to give it to us," he said quietly. "Even before you knew about the bigamy, even before the investigation. You never planned to put my name on the title." "No," I said. "I did not. Because I know you, son. You have a big heart. You are generous. You want to save people. But in this world, generosity without protection is just blood in the water for sharks. I leaned back in my seat looking at the steering wheel. I worked for 40 years to build what we have, Tyrell. I worked in warehouses where the heat was so bad men passed out on the line. I saved when everyone else was spending. I bought land when everyone else was renting. I did not do that so a stranger could walk in and take half of it just because she wore a white dress. I looked him in the eye. Wealth is not just having money, Tyrell. Wealth is keeping it. And the only way to keep it is to make sure nobody can take it from you, not even yourself. Tyrell looked at the document again. He saw the dates. He saw the signatures. He realized that while he was busy planning a party, I was busy building a wall around his future. So even if I married her, he said, his voice full of wonder, even if the wedding was real, even if she was not a criminal, she never would have gotten the house. Never, I said. She would have lived there. She would have slept there. But she never would have owned a single brick. And the moment she tried to leave you, she would have walked out with exactly what she walked in with, nothing. Tyrell closed the folder. He placed his hand on top of it. He sat there for a long moment, letting the silence fill the cab. It was not an awkward silence anymore. It was the silence of understanding. He was beginning to see the chessboard. He was realizing that while he was playing checkers, I had been playing a grandmaster game of strategy. You knew I would be mad, he said, looking at me. If the wedding had gone well and I found out about this trust, I would have been furious. I would have said you were controlling me. Yes, I agreed. You would have hated me. You would have said I did not trust you. And you did it anyway, Tyrell said. I did it anyway, I affirmed. Because a father's job is not to be liked. A father's job is to protect. I would rather have you hate me in $1 million home than love me in a homeless shelter. Tyrell let out a breath that sounded like a sob. He looked out the window again, but this time he was not seeing the blurry lights. He was seeing the bullet he had dodged. She called me a coward, he whispered, before the police took her away. She said I was a spineless boy living in your shadow. I reached out and grabbed his shoulder, turning him to face me. She was wrong, I said fiercely. You are not a coward. You are a man who is learning, and tonight you learned the hardest lesson of all. You learned that love is not enough. You need logic. You need law. You need leverage. I squeezed his shoulder. I am not going to live forever, Tyrell. One day, this truck will be empty. One day, I will be with your mother. And when that day comes, I need to know that you are safe. I need to know that everything I built does not disappear because you met the wrong person. This trust is my way of holding your hand when I am gone. Tyrell looked at me. His eyes were swimming with tears, but they were not the tears of a heartbroken boy anymore. They were the tears of a man who finally understood the weight of the crown he was inheriting. He looked at the gray hairs on my head. He looked at the calluses on my hands. He saw the decades of sacrifice that had culminated in that blue folder. You were 10 steps ahead, he said, shaking his head in disbelief. The whole time. You were 10 steps ahead of her. I tapped my temple. Logistics, son. Always check the route before you load the cargo. Tyrell let out a laugh. It was a watery, weak laugh, but it was real. He unbuckled his seatbelt. He moved across the center console, awkward and heavy in the cramped space. He wrapped his arms around me. It was not a polite hug. It was a desperate, clinging embrace. He buried his face in my shoulder, smelling of expensive cologne and fear. I wrapped my arms around him, feeling the solid weight of my son. He shook against me, sobbing quietly. Thank you, he whispered into my jacket. Thank you for saving me. Thank you for being smarter than me. Thank you for not listening to me when I told you to go away. I held him tight. I patted his back the way I used to when he woke up from a nightmare. I have got you, son, I said. I have always got you. We stayed like that for a long time. 2 men sitting in a truck in an empty parking lot under the orange glow of the streetlights. The world outside was dark and dangerous. There were predators like Haley waiting in the shadows. There were traps and lies and heartbreak. But in here, we were safe. We had the truth. We had the trust. And most importantly, we had each other. Tyrell finally pulled back. He wiped his face with his sleeve. He looked exhausted, but his eyes were clear. Can we go get that burger now, he asked. I am starving. I smiled. I put the truck in gear. Yeah, I said. Let's go get that burger, and then tomorrow we are going to sit down with Fletcher. I want to teach you how that trust works. I want you to know every clause, every line, every asset. Because next time I might not be here to pull the trigger. Tyrell nodded. I am ready to learn, he said. I looked at him, and I believed him. The boy who wanted a fairy tale was gone. The man who wanted a legacy had taken his place. And that I thought as I pulled back onto the road was the best wedding gift I could have ever given him. The smell of sawdust and fresh paint is the best perfume in the world. It smells like progress. It smells like a future that you build with your own hands rather than one you steal. I stood in the middle of the living room of a dilapidated Victorian house on the outskirts of Atlanta. Sunlight streamed through the bay windows, illuminating the dust motes dancing in the air. 6 months ago, I was standing in a ballroom surrounded by lies and expensive flowers. Today, I am standing in a construction zone wearing work boots and covered in drywall dust, and I have never been happier. I watched Tyrell across the room. He was rolling out a set of blueprints on a makeshift table made of 2 sawhorses and a piece of plywood. He was pointing at a structural beam, explaining something to the contractor we had hired. He looked different. He stood taller. His shoulders were broad and relaxed. The frantic, desperate look in his eyes was gone, replaced by a quiet confidence. He was no longer the boy trying to buy affection. He was the architect designing his own life. We had bought this property together. It was a wreck when we found it. A beautiful shell with a rotten foundation, just like his relationship with Haley. But unlike that relationship, we could fix this house. We stripped it down to the studs. We replaced the wiring. We reinforced the beams. We were doing it the right way. No shortcuts, no facades. Just solid, honest work. Tyrell looked up and caught me watching him. He smiled. It was a real smile. It reached his eyes. "Hey, Dad," he called out. "The lumber delivery is here. Can you sign for it?" I nodded. I am on it. I walked out to the porch. As I checked the manifest and counted the boards, I felt a sense of deep satisfaction. This was my world. Logistics, numbers, tangible things. I signed the clipboard and waved the driver off. When I turned back, Tyrell was standing in the doorway holding 2 cups of coffee. "Black, no sugar," he said, handing me one. "Just the way you like it." We sat on the steps of the porch, looking out at the overgrown garden we planned to tackle next week. It was a peaceful moment, the kind of moment that feels earned because you have walked through fire to get there. "Fletcher called me this morning," Tyrell said quietly. He blew on his hot coffee, staring at the steam rising into the cool air. I took a sip. "And?" "The judge sentenced her yesterday," Tyrell said. 15 years. No possibility of parole for at least 10. The fraud charges in Illinois combined with the bigamy and the attempted murder charge regarding Lucas. The judge wanted to make an example of her. I nodded slowly. 15 years. It was a long time. Time enough for her beauty to fade. Time enough for her charm to wither. She would have a lot of time to think about the choices she made. "How do you feel?" I asked. Tyrell shrugged. He looked at his hand where the ring used to be. "I feel relieved," he said. "For a long time I was angry. I was angry at her, I was angry at myself. I was even angry at you for being right. But now I just feel like a weight has been lifted. She is in the past, Dad. She is just a bad chapter in a book that is getting better every day." He took a sip of his coffee. "And Lucas. Lucas is doing well," I said. "I saw him last week. He gained 10 pounds. He is starting a support group for men who have been victims of financial abuse. He calls it the Survivors Club. He wants you to come speak at the first meeting." Tyrell laughed. "Maybe one day, when I am ready." We sat in silence for a while, listening to the birds in the old oak trees. So I said casually, "Are we going to talk about the young lady who brought us sandwiches yesterday? Or are we going to pretend that did not happen?" Tyrell blushed. "It was a subtle thing, but I saw it. Her name is Maya," he said. "She is an interior designer. We met at the supply store." I nodded. I liked Maya. When she came to the site, she did not ask about the budget. She did not ask how much the house would sell for. She asked about the history of the building. She asked if we were keeping the original fireplace. She looked at Tyrell when he spoke, not at his wallet. And most importantly, she brought me a sandwich too. Ham and cheese. She remembered I don't like turkey. "She seems nice," I said. "She is," Tyrell said. "She is real Dad. She has her own job. She has her own life. She does not need me to rescue her. She just wants to be with me. That is the only kind of person worth your time, son," I said. Tyrell looked at me. "You checked her out, didn't you?" I smiled, innocent as a lamb. "I have no idea what you are talking about," Dad Tyrell warned, but he was smiling. "I may have made a few calls," I admitted. Just a basic background check, no criminal record. Credit score is 750. Volunteers at the animal shelter on weekends. Tyrell shook his head, laughing. You are impossible. I am careful, I corrected him. And now you are too. Tyrell grew serious. Yeah, I am. I took her to dinner last night. And do you know what I did? I split the bill. I raised an eyebrow. And she did not blink an eye, Tyrell said. She actually insisted on paying the tip. It felt good, Dad. It felt like a partnership. I reached out and patted his knee. That is because it is a partnership. That is what love is supposed to be. Two people carrying the load together, not one person carrying the other until his back breaks. We finished our coffee and stood up. The sun was starting to set, casting long golden shadows across the lawn. I am going to head out, Tyrell said. Maya and I are going to a gallery opening tonight. Do you need a ride home? I shook my head. No, I have my truck. I'm going to stay here for a bit. Double-check the measurements for the kitchen cabinets. Tyrell nodded. Okay, don't stay too late, old man. You need your rest. He walked to his car, a sensible sedan he had bought after selling the flashy sports car Haley had made him lease. He waved as he drove off. I watched his taillights disappear down the driveway. He was going to be okay. He was stronger now. He was scarred, yes. But scars are just proof that you survived. I turned back to the house. I walked inside and gathered my tools. I placed the hammer and the tape measure back into my worn leather belt. I walked through the empty rooms, listening to the house settle. It was a good house. It had good bones. I walked out to the back porch and looked up at the sky. The first stars were appearing, pale pinpricks of light against the deepening violet. I took a deep breath of the cool evening air. I reached into my pocket and pulled out the brass key to the penthouse, the key that had started it all. We had sold the penthouse last month. We put the money into the trust and used a portion of it to buy this renovation project. We turned a dead asset into a living business. I looked at the sky, finding the brightest star. We did it, Lucille, I whispered. I could almost feel her hand on my shoulder. I could almost hear her laugh. She would have liked this house. She would have liked seeing Tyrell covered in sawdust. She would have been proud. I had kept my promise. I had protected our son. I had protected our legacy. But more than that, I had taught him how to protect himself. I put the key away and leaned against the railing. People think that wealth is about having things. They think it is about the cars and the clothes and the penthouses. But they are wrong. Wealth is about freedom. It is about the freedom to walk away from a toxic situation. It is about the freedom to say no. It is about the freedom to sleep soundly at night knowing that everything you have is safe. I thought about the thousands of people out there who are in the same position Tyrell was in, blinded by love, manipulated by greed, afraid to speak up because they do not want to be alone. If you are listening to this story and you feel a knot in your stomach because it sounds too familiar, listen to me. Trust your gut. If someone loves you, they will love your boundaries. If someone loves you, they will want you to be secure. If someone demands that you prove your love by making yourself vulnerable, financial or emotional, run. Run as fast as you can. Do not be afraid to be the bad guy. Do not be afraid to be the suspicious parent or the cautious partner. It is better to be lonely for a season than to be broken for a lifetime. I am Calvin Rhodes. I am a father. I am a builder, and I am a survivor. And as I look at this house that my son and I are building together, I know one thing for sure. The foundation is solid, the walls are strong, and the door is locked to anyone who does not have a pure heart. I picked up my toolbox and walked down the steps to my truck. The gravel crunched under my boots. It was the sound of a job well done. Tomorrow is another day, another shipment to manage, another wall to build. But tonight I am going home to a quiet house. I will pour a glass of lemonade. I will sit in my chair. And I will sleep the deep, peaceful sleep of a man who has nothing to hide and everything to live for. Life is good, but only if you fight for it. Before I go, let me ask you one question. Who is holding the keys to your life? Is it you? Or is it someone who is just waiting to change the locks? Think about it. And if you liked this story, hit that like button and subscribe. Share it with someone who needs to hear it. Maybe you can save a life too. See you in the next story. Stay safe, stay sharp, and never let your guard down. This journey taught me that true love is not just about giving everything you have. It is about protecting what matters most. Being a parent means having the courage to be the villain in your child's story today so you can be their hero tomorrow. We often think wealth is measured in dollars, but real wealth is the peace of mind that comes from knowing your legacy is safe from predators. Don't let guilt manipulate you. Secure your assets, trust your gut, and remember a boundary is not a wall to keep people out. It is a gate to keep the wrong people from destroying your home. If you believe that protecting your family is the highest form of love, hit that like button right now. And tell me in the comments below, have you ever had to make a tough decision to save a loved one from themselves? I read every single story. Don't forget to subscribe for more lessons on life, law, and legacy. Stay safe out there.